always ask them, you know, every week, how are you feeling? How's your sleep been? How's your recovery been? If you're up all night and you're working like crazy, then you got to come in the next day to bench heavy or squat heavy. It's going to be hard. I tell him all the time, like, hey, dude, don't rush into this session. The goal is to prioritize the lifts to make sure we're recovering. And I think some people have an emotional attachment to doing more. So they want to do more work and they think that's going to get more results, which isn't the case. You know, it's how hard are you working with what's on your plan?
Sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. I'm going to do things a little bit different this time. I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. That way we can rip through it real fast and then get into the Ghost Clash. So, Josh.
My name is Josh Galone. I'm a powerlifter. I am coached by Jaden. I live right in PA, right outside of Philadelphia.
What are your lifts?
My squats in meet is 700, my bench is 415, and my deadlift is 650.
That's at 220?
Yeah, 220.
What's up with that?
You're too fat to get back down.
We missed weight a couple times.
Oh, so you cut to 220?
No.
That's supposed to be 198.
It's supposed to be 198.
Yeah. I get it. So what did you weigh?
203.
203? Are you kidding me? Well, are you kidding me?
We couldn't find a sauna that day. That's what it was.
Oh, man. All right. So, Jaden.
Yeah. All right. My name is Jaden Lacaria. I coach both these guys, N'dear Hayden and Josh Galone. Been with me for a couple years, and they made tremendous progress. They're super fun to coach, and we have a good relationship. So I'm looking forward to being at the Ghost Clash, coaching both of them, and putting up some big totals. Of course, we'll both have pro totals of this meet. N'dear's trying to break the all-time world record squat at 181. So that'll be awesome.
All right. You're being a little humble there. Your best lifts are 830,
Okay.
450, and 618 or 678?
So my best pull ever is 678 in a meet.
Yeah.
But my last meet I did at 198, I went 830, 450, 630, and I tore my hands open pulling hook grip. But, hopefully I do this meet here in 8 weeks and we change all that. So.
Why should anyone join this Discord? Why wouldn't you want to? It's not fake, it's genuine, it's authentic, it's well worth it. The Discord has been nothing short of meeting new people who are incredibly like-minded, giving each other a bunch of ball busting, but also being there to support each other whenever life throws their way. The best part of it for me has also been able to connect with lifters of all levels, help coach, get coached, and also connect with other new fathers who are enjoying the journey of lifting and trying to balance that out. It's the glue that holds all of us together. A common interest will bring people from different walks of life, people who are multimillionaires, these characters and everything else in between, united under one thing, the pursuit of strength.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. But what if you had two coaches? What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
Hi, my name is Amber Watson. I'm a personal trainer and power lifter, and over the past couple years, I've had several consultations with Tom Shepard. Tom is always very insightful, and he has a depth of knowledge that he always brings with a really personal approach. So no matter what questions or issues that I've come to the table with, he's able to answer them very specifically and help me find really specific solutions. This includes helping me sort through issues in my diet and nutrition to help me finally start gaining some muscle and some weight, which has resulted in about 40 pounds that I've gained over the past couple of years. This, along with some really specific training advice, has helped me to add over 300 pounds to my total, which has just been incredible. So I highly recommend Tom Shepard if you're looking for expertise or top-notch guidance.
Yeah, and then in what year was it that you were second in the North Americans?
Oh, so that was in 2021.
2021. So
yeah, in bodybuilding. So I competed in as a middleweight that show, got second there, and then also did USA's that year and got fourth.
Yeah,
so,
and then tore your quads.
Yeah, tore them quads off. Yeah,
which we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
we'll get to that later. And then last year you came back.
Yeah. So last year, I came back. I ended up doing NPC national championships in Dallas, Texas. So I got 7th place, which is my worst placing ever in bodybuilding. But it was a good learning experience. I went down to the lightweight class, which is like 153 pounds, so super, super small. But since then, I've rebounded like 65, 70 pounds, and I'm bigger and stronger than I've been before, and my physique's a lot better. So this year should be good. So.
All right.
All right. So I'm N'dear Hayden. I'm a powerlifter, compete at 181. My best lifts is 771 squat, which I finished last year as the highest squat of the year, a rep squat of the year. My highest bench is still 420 on record, and my highest deadlift is 644 currently. Right now, I'm probably sitting at number 19 all time, 181, and number 9 all time. Oh no, number 9 all time squat in general at reps. So this go around, I'm hoping to break the all time world record, which is set at 806. So I'm planning to, or hoping to break it well past 806. And then I came down here to squat 800 for my regular prep. So I plan to put up some big numbers this time. So
how many weeks out are you guys?
3 weeks now.
3. So how did you guys hook up with Jaden?
So it's funny. I actually found him on Instagram. He was like in like my regular searches, and then I ended up watching him because I felt like he was smaller than what he was at first. And I'm like, how the fuck is
that's all right.
How is he squatting so much? And I was like, so what am I doing wrong? So I actually reached out to him, and I was already with a powerlifting team during that time. And then I reached out to him to try to get some pointers. And then from there, I reached out to try to get coached by him. And I think that was 2020?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, 2020. And I was working with him all the way up until I did the Arnold's. And then we placed really well in the Arnold's. And then I met Josh while I was training for the Arnold's, and then brought Josh to meet.
Where'd you
Jaden.
meet him?
I met him actually at Iron Sport.
Okay.
In Galone.
Oh, God.
So
how long did you train there?
At Galone, at Iron Sport, I probably trained there like 3 months or something like that. Not even. Right. So how I met Josh, Josh was like an ego lifter at the time. And so we was actually squatting, and I seen him on the monolift, and at that time I didn't know how to use the monolift. So I was pretty much, I think I was doing front squats that day, and he went all the way up to like 525, and I seen that he was like super gassed, and I think I did like 535 front squats, so like sets of 5, and and then
I know how that works.
Yeah.
So how'd that make you feel, man?
It was rough. I thought he was gonna be one of those like half reppers who throw the wraps on, have no idea what they were doing, and then he started repping out like in the 5s, and I was like, all right, never mind.
So it was definitely a fun time, and then we end up like I think he ended up asking me what did I compete at the time. I think that would have been my first meet at 181. Before that I was 165. So he kind of had a hard time believing that I was only a 181 at that time. And then just so happened we ended up at the same meet that day. And I ended up getting best lifter.
Yeah.
And
did he make weight?
He did make weight during that time. He made weight during that time. And then we kind of hit it off ever since then, and we've been pretty much competing and training every day with each other, and day in, day out. He know my family, I know his family.
So you got him into powerlifting?
He was already powerlifting.
No, I was already powerlifting.
Okay.
That.
Yeah.
But
when did you start? Like when was your first meet?
I want to say my first meet was back in like 2014 or so, and it was like an RPS meet because it was. Trying to think, it was like right after probably my like junior year of high school. That's when I got into like lifting heavy, like doing squat, bench, deadlift. Like people at the gym taught me what to do, and then we had Steve used to hold meets at the gym, so we did a meet there, and then I kind of went from there. And then I kind of took a hiatus, and then I started training again and competing in USPA, and then we met each other getting ready for that RPS meet. And then it was from there on, we've just been up.
So you trained at Iron Sport for a long time.
Yeah, I've been in Iron Sports since like my freshman year of high school.
So you have some good Steve stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start?
I think I started powerlifting in 2017. I kind of met somebody through the Philadelphia Fire Department, and he was competing, and from there he kind of like gave me this app called 531, and I was kind of went off and did it off on my own for the most part. And then when I felt like I was pretty much ready, I actually came back to him, and he introduced me to his team, which at the time was the Barbell Bullies, and I started training with them for a long time, all the way up until I met Jaden. So
how did you define what almost ready means? Because there's a lot of lifters that want to compete, right? But they don't think they're strong enough.
I just felt like I was at the point where I wanted to do something more. Because being in the gym was never going to get me to the point where I felt like I was ready to hit the platform. So I was like, I got to put this into action and actually implement it. So once I think my squat at the time was probably like at 165 during that year, it was probably 450. My bench was 255, and I think my deadlift was, I think maybe like 455 or something like that for my first meet at 165, and we pretty much just trained up from there. And then ever since then, I just hit the ground running, and that was pretty much it from there. Yeah.
Jane, when did you start actually training?
Like training?
Training.
Okay. So I started training when I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
So I started really, really young, but I was fortunate enough from my stepfather was really big into bodybuilding. So I had like a whole gym in my house from the start of 11 on up. So I'd go down there and train. And then my uncle had just moved back from California, and he used to coach one of the biggest high schools in Los Angeles in football. So he came back and was really good in strength conditioning. So I had that connection there, and they just really took me under their wing and taught me a lot of stuff. Of course, like I was a huge fan of bodybuilding and powerlifting early on. So I would always read and learn as much as I could just because I wanted to be able to know how to do things on my own. So I started training for football. And then of course, like fast forward through high school, I got more involved in the powerlifting. I trained at the local YMCA, and I had a lot of guys who competed in single ply, and then also some guys who were raw. And most of the guys that competed in single ply were bench only. So I would always just watch them lift. And at the time I was 13, 14 years old at the YMCA, and they would bench like 600-700 pounds in a shirt. And I was like, that's insane, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I never seen anything like that. And then I started training with them, and I started learning what like dynamic effort was, what max effort was. And we would just go through workouts, and I would show up every day after school. I'd train with them. And then even after football practice during the season, I would still go and train with them like 3 or 4 days a week. So I would get my training, you know, pretty much under control for the most part, you know, during the off season. But like, of course, when football season would ramp up, it would get a little bit harder, and I'd kind of have to like dial things back a little bit. But I did that, and then once I got to college, I started my bachelor's degree at West Virginia University. I went ahead and just decided solely just to focus on powerlifting. I was like, okay, cool, football's kind of like done. Like, there's I can transfer to somewhere else and try to be able to, walk on and see what happens, or go to a junior college. Like I had a lot of junior colleges I was looking at, but I was like, all right, cool. Like what is for me and what feels right for me. So I was like, I love bodybuilding and powerlifting, more than anything at this point. So let's just focus on that in education. So that's when I really just decided, okay, let's do my first meet. This was 2018. I did a USPA meet. It was the Strong Box in Huntington, West Virginia. So I did a raw with wraps, and I remember went to the meet and ended up bombing out of the meet because I tried cutting weight to 198. I had no help either for this meet. I just went in there. I was like, all right, I'm doing wraps. Like I used to just watch like Eric.
How'd you bomb out?
Oh, so I bombed out on squat. It was
you just missed the squat. I mean, how do you bomb out raw is always something. You know what I'm saying?
So for me, it went basically. I was. This is before open powerlifting was around. So there was what was it called? It was
Powerlifting Watch.
Powerlifting Watch, yes. So I'd go on Powerlifting Watch, look at all the records, and be like, okay, cool. Like I can get to that. I can get that. Like these are attainable in the next couple of years. Well, then, I looked at USPA, what all the national records were, the state records were. I was like, state records, got those easy. Then it was like national records for drug tested, USPA, or for like my age group in USPA. And I would just go after those records. So I remember for like the 18, 19-year-old at 198, it was just the national record in general was like a little over 630, I think. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to open up with that. So I'm just like, all right, let's just open up with it. Like, who cares? It's nothing. And I just, for some reason, I was panicking. I was not going to make weight, and I'm under 198 pounds. So I was trying to cut weight sitting in the sauna, and I just thought my scale was wrong. I was like, there's no way this is right. So I remember going to Huntington, getting down there, making weight, but I drink a magnesium citrate, like one of the drinks. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm going to make sure I don't miss this weight.
And you're already under.
Yes, I'm already under.
Okay.
So
this is great.
I didn't realize like that took some time to kick in. So I made weight. And then it kicked in for the refeed. So I'm trying to eat and everything's just coming right out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with me? And this lasted the whole night. And I got to the meet and I was still like sick. Like I just felt so depleted, just beat up. And I had no one to wrap my knees either. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to wrap these myself. And I didn't know how like a meet was ran in terms of like time. So they're like calling my name to the platform and I haven't taken my last warm up yet. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, all right, cool, just lower the bar. 644 opener. It took my last one of my warm-ups was like 400. I just jumped straight to 644 wraps. And I didn't even take a wrap warm-up at all. So it was just like a huge shock. And I remember Johnny Lane was the state meet director at the time for USPA. And they went ahead and let me finish the meet and just go ahead and like get experience. So I still got the bench and deadlift, but it was crazy looking back. Like, oh man, like, you think like, you weren't really doing anything cool or like you weren't really like making good progress, which in that time I was, but like how far I came since then is like nuts. Like,
so what happened after that meet?
So after that meet, that was 2018. And then fast forward a little bit, I did another meet towards the end of that year. It was like the USPA Holiday Havoc, which was in Fairmont, West Virginia. I remember because I was at West Virginia University still at this time. And I did that meet, which I ended up doing really, really good. I ended up squatting like 666 in reps at 198. I was 19 at the time. And then I benched like 365 or something like that. Then I pulled 600 for the first time, I remember. And I was like, okay, cool. Like this was a good day for me. Like I can build off this. And I was a little bit more knowledgeable at the time because I was training with like the West Virginia powerlifting team. So I had a lot of my buddies who I went to high school with also that were still there. So we would all train together. And like I started to really like understand things a little bit more. I worked with a couple coaches too. I worked with T. Cummings, so I worked with him, and then I also worked with Tony Montgomery as well. So both those guys taught me some cool stuff when I was like young and like learning how to peak for a meet. So that's kind of why I had a good first meet or second meet, I would say. And then fast forward to 2019, I transferred to Ohio State. I got into their their physical activity and coaching specialization, their program. So I got into school there, went there to do my bachelor's, and then that's when I went to West Side. So
why'd you choose Ohio State?
So they had the best coaching program in the country, and that was like the main reason for me. Like I love competing, obviously, but my outside of like coaching, powerlifting, and bodybuilding like I do now, at the time my focus was, okay, I want to be a strength conditioning coach at the collegiate level. What's the best opportunity for me? What's the best school for that? Like what makes most sense for me? And like me competing in powerlifting and stuff and bodybuilding, it was just like, all right, moving to Columbus is a little bit better. It's still the same distance from like where my parents live. So I was like, all right, still like 2 hours away, 2.5 hours. Not a big deal, close to home, just a better opportunity. So I got to Ohio State, got my bachelor's degree in that. And then I also, of course, got my master's in master of sports coaching, which I finished that up this past August. So school-wise, like that's always been like the number one thing. Like I want to keep learning on my own as like a coach and like know as much as I can. But like when it comes into actually like application and applying things, I think that's super important as well. And like there at Ohio State, like their, biomechanics courses and their kinesiology courses were really in depth. And that's stuff like I get excited about, learning how the body moves, why it moves that way, and then how it applies to training. And those are two things that I felt like, were super essential for me to be able to kind of take myself as an athlete to the next level, but then also, of course, as a coach. And then, of course, when I got to West Side, which was 2019, so my first semester at Ohio State, I got to West Side. I remember having to try out. So I got invited. I remember Tom Barry sent me a message, and he was just like, hey, bring your best bench with you on Wednesday morning. This is, like week 2 of classes, right? And I was like, I didn't care what my classes were. Like, I was going to be at Westside in the morning and make any adjustment I had to do. So I remember getting there, trying out, and it goes really good. Like, Louis happy and stuff. And then they invite me back for the next session, which was like, this was a Friday, this is a Wednesday. And we had dynamic lower that day. And I just remember like how brutal that session was. Like, it was just like super taxing, and just, I was beat up. But I just remember going to class, after that Wednesday and after that Friday, I was late back-to-back days. And it was an English class. It was like a GE course. And I remember that whole semester I was late every single day of that class. And the teacher, she just wasn't very understanding. She just, super, super strict. And she just would always just give me a hard time. I ended up passing the class still. Still got like a B in the class, but my attendance took a real hit because of Westside in that semester. But I was like, all right, like now I know like the regimen, I'm not going to schedule a course in the morning. Like, that's going to interfere with training.
So what was it like being there with that, let's just call it education system, versus the education system that you're learning from?
Oh, the conjugate?
Yeah, because you got the conjugate, then you got what you're learning in school, which essentially isn't conjugate by, at all, right?
No.
So they're two opposing systems in a way.
Essentially, yeah. So with the bachelor's degree, with the undergrad program, with the physical activity and coaching specialization, the one thing I noticed was that it put a real big emphasis on working with different types of age groups. So it was like, how do you communicate with like kids? How do you communicate with adults? How do you communicate with actual elite athletes? And the program starts to shift towards the end with working on specifically like elite athletes. Because most of the people in that same major are going to be like strength coaches or working, one-on-one with high-level athletes. So it was, more performance based, and a lot of it was how you should manage your day, set your day up. And then the most in-depth training it would go in is like just basic linear periodization. It wouldn't go into like anything different or, more specific than that. So it's just like baseline stuff, which was really, easy and, simple to get the hang of in terms of what they were wanting for, classwork and coursework. But of course, at Westside Conjugate, you learn everything from Louis. You learn max effort days. You learn the dynamic effort days, how you should use it, how long you should run these waves for. So like, your dynamic effort, we're running in 3-week waves with variation. Then we're swapping it out. Max effort, we're rotating a new movement in every week. And then of course we would wait 4 weeks or more to go back to that same exercise, which is what we did. And with what was interesting is that a lot of the strength conditioning coaches that were at the collegiate level, like Division 1, even Division 2, they would come in and train with me, and Louis would be like, okay, hey, take these guys through, the workout today. So we'd have, dynamic lower. So they would train with me, then they do all the accessory work with me, and I tell them like why we're doing this, why, we have the bands and chains set up like this, why this bar. And, I was still training like an athlete a little bit. So I would do like box jumps and stuff, which I don't know how much I carried over to my actual squat or deadlift, but I would still like do that stuff all the time for fun. And what would be so interesting to me is like hearing feedback from a lot of those coaches and how they do their training and how, they do sometimes total polar opposite within their program from like what their head strength coach would want them to do, and then of course how they do their own training, which is more like along the lines of conjugate. So seeing that, and then of course like fast forward to now, like all my experience up to this point working with collegiate coaches and like having a lot of close friends who are coaching at that level and seeing how they lay their programming out is very interesting. But also what's really, really cool for me, it gets me excited, is seeing how they do implement accommodating resistance, how they do kind of take, parts and bits and pieces of conjugate and put that into making athletes faster, stronger, more explosive, because there is a time and place for conjugate in sport-specific training. I think some coaches get so stuck in their ways, or it's like, it's got to be linear periodization, it's got to be prevalence chart, it's got to be this or that, which, you know what I mean? Yeah. Some things kind of change and get outdated as time goes on.
How did your program change when you started working with him?
A lot. I used to I don't think I ever truly squatted in sleeves the whole time that I used to be in my old programs. I probably did like raw knee and then straight to wraps. I was probably like scared to go over like 405 and without wraps on. So actually like my squat changed a lot when I met Jaden. I started to like fully take off when I met Jaden, especially as far as technique and as far as just I don't even accuse. For the most part, I was the most unconventional squatter probably. I did low bar with really narrow stance. I was probably like my feet was probably like this.
Yeah. So like a good morning.
Yeah, like a good morning, and I would literally hit below parallel, but it was the most unconventional squat ever. And then we kind of like opened it up, and I was able to stand a lot more upright under the bar, and I got way stronger. We got my sleeve squat way stronger, which actually carried over to my rap squat now, where it is today actually. And that's only over like a period of 2 years.
Yeah.
What about the programming side?
It was kind of both conjugate in a way, in a sense. I don't. It's hard to explain it, but it's definitely a lot different. That's the only way I can truly is complete polar opposites. But his training definitely made me 10 times stronger than I probably would have ever been.
So I'll ask him, how did you change his training?
Yeah.
So what was it?
Yeah.
So when he came to me, like, it's funny, he said like he'd always put wraps on. I remember I sent him his program week 1 and he's like squatting in wraps. I'm like, no, like, like we're not doing wraps like this. This is not what we're doing. And I remember he always wanted to max out all the time. He's like, I want to see what I got. I want to see what I got today. I'm like, dude, we know you squat like 600 pounds right now. Like, we're not going to max out anytime soon. You know, so like we did a lot of bands and change. And like, you know, in the off season, with raw guys, one thing I like to do is really make sure they're staying healthy and we're not pounding a lot of straight weight. So we do use a lot of bands and chains, and we'll run those in like 3 to 4 week waves. So like basically, for example, if I take Josh, for example, on bench and we say, okay, hey, I want you doing straight bar this week and we're going to do 80 pounds in chains. And the first 2 weeks we're doing, let's say 75%. For 2 sets, and then we do 1 set after that, 78% of actual bar weight, and then with the chains. So we'll run those for those working sets, and then we'll keep pushing that for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'll end up working up to like a top double, top single by the end of that. So like week 1, you're kind of having like the adaptation phase. So like you're getting used to the variation, you're starting to get stronger, and then from there, like you're able to progress every single week. So like, but in the prep setting, I do make some changes where it's more of like a it's not more of like a linear periodization like some like traditional raw lifters would do, which I think that can be very, very good in some settings. Like, so if you look at undulating periodization, for example, you'll see like you'll have the really heavy lift 1 week, then you have like that moderate intensity like in between. So like a heavy conventional deadlift if you pull sumo, vice versa. What I have both these guys do that works really well for him, especially with N'dear, because he's such fast twitch oriented. I can drive him into the ground really easily if I'm not careful. So I'll have him squat heavy. Like if he squats 700, you know, for sets of 3 or 4, he's okay. But when he hits like 800 or hits like 770, weights around that are going to super, you know, fatigue his body more than, you know, most people. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't pull heavy this week too. It's just too much. So what I'll have him do, which has worked really well, we'll take that heavy squat and wraps, and then once we go into later in the week for that next lower body session, it's not a deadlift. We'll do usually a variation of a good morning. So what we'll run is like a camber bar good morning, SSB good morning, something to work on his weak points that gives him a good carryover and he's not fatigued. And then the next week we'll come back and we'll end up hitting a heavy deadlift. And then he'll usually hit a squat variation, which typically it'll be in sleeves. It'll be something along the lines of mid to low 400s for pause sets, like 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 4. And then we'll slowly build those up as the weeks go on. So he's still progressing in that, but then still the intensity is still high enough. It's not like he's doing nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the heavy squat is progressing every other week.
Yes. Yeah. So like if he's, so like, for example, he'll take, you know, 800 tomorrow, right? In training. The squat 2 weeks ago, he had 2 singles at 780.
Okay. And then the one in between was some squat variation.
Yeah, it was SSB. Yeah.
And you're doing the same thing with Josh.
Yeah. And the reason those work so well with both these guys, I mean, their training styles, of course, are very, very similar, but also too with Josh, like we even moved his training down to 3 days. So N'dear has a 4-day split. He has a 3-day split, which works better for him just because his body tends to get beat up a little bit quicker. But one thing with Josh, he can handle a little bit more frequency than N'dear can with a lot of his lifts. So sometimes like for a bench, we'll bench sometimes twice a week during prep, but this prep we've been benching once a week just because it's working a little better. His arms have been a little bit beat up.
All right.
So
So when you went to the 3-day a week, how do you feel about that?
It helped, I think, have more recovery time, but then also like it was hard to try to fit 4 days into the week.
Mhm.
And then I wrapped N'dear's knees. So trying to wrap his knees and bench twice, it felt horrible on my elbows and my back. Like the amount of strength I had to put in just to wrapping his knees, like a lot of the lifts that day, like I try to have like either some type of dealer lift. Like recently it's been like, because our deadlifts are good mornings on the days that we have the heavy squats, I just sacrifice my good mornings, and they're pretty bad looking, but I can wrap his knees and make sure that he hits his squats, because we don't squat on the same day together, just because I wrap myself and it would be too much to wrap myself and wrap him.
Okay. So you're laying the training out to be able to help each other as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Right?
the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we figured out, once I figured out his rapping was way better than my raps, I was like, we never went back. So, so I've been using his raps forever now. I mean, I use casting raps. So Josh Crink, I don't even know where his strength come from, but I have never been rapped like that. I mean, technically, yes, I have Jaden, but honestly, like, Josh is just, I don't know. He came from a different planet when it comes to rapping. And it is definitely like helped me a lot. And it takes it, obviously squatting this heavy weight takes a lot of energy out of you in general. And like Jaden said to me before, why wrap your knees and squat at the same time if you're taking really heavy max effort? So with him doing it for me, it takes a lot of thought out of it, especially when I'm squatting. So it just definitely like boosted me up a lot. My stamina during squats went up a lot just because of Josh in general. So
Well, I'm interested in the dynamic of how you train together, right? And then make that flip.
So normally what we would do is he would squat earlier in the week, so it'd be like a Monday, and then I'll bench that day, and then we'll probably wait like a day in between, and then we'll go and I'll squat, and then he'll bench on the day that I'm squatting. I normally have problems with my biceps and triceps sometimes, especially when I squat. So I have to take a max effort bench in the beginning of the week, because if I take it after I squat, my bench takes a really big toll.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how we kind of work that out, because like I said, I get really sore after a heavy squat.
Yeah.
I used to have really bad shooting pains down my arms.
Just a tendonitis.
Yes, a lot. But once we started working on more mobility with coach, he gave me a lot more mobility stuff to do. It's gotten a lot better, but I still every once in a while have really bad tendonitis in my elbows after squatting really heavy weight. But so far I haven't had major issues in comp. Because my adrenaline is just rushing through that time, but I definitely feel it afterwards.
What's some mobility things that you're doing?
So
or let me reframe that. What are the mobility things you're compliant in doing?
Well, no, I'm compliant with all of them. I'm just not. I don't know the names of them.
Yeah,
I'm not. He's better at the names than
what's he
doing?
Yeah. So some things that I'll have him do is a lot of nerve flossing, just because the nerve will get impinged, and a lot of things that I've noticed with his, nerve impingements and injury or nagging. I want to say injuries, just being beat up. We'll do things like rolling out your lats. So just literally rolling out your lats from the side, because it'll help that ulnar nerve that sometimes gets impinged. So like your lats will just get so knotted and tight, like it will cause that nerve to get compressed. Other stuff we'll do is like wall circles, just stuff to get your shoulders really loosened up. We'll do some banded stuff just for mobility. So for example, another thing he would say, like his biceps will get flared up. So like we'll just back off his arm training a little bit to work with that. And then overall, of course, for like his lower body mobility, it stays pretty good. Like we don't have really any issues with that. But yeah, just upper body stuff. It's just nerve flossing, rolling out your T-spine, rolling out your lats, getting cupping done, scraping done, deep tissue work done a lot. He just got some of it done before he came out here. I've been on him about it this prep, making sure he stays on top of it, and it's helped a good bit.
All right, so you're 3 weeks out, so you got to be beat up too. So like, where are you beat up?
It doesn't really bother me as much as it bothers him. I mean, the weights seem to be a lot. Like, I've noticed it now. Like, I actually like having deloads. Like, I used to hate taking deloads because I used to kind of ego lift. So, like, when you take a deload and you got to show up to the gym and do like 50%, you kind of feel like a loser.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, now, like, even after squatting this week, we squatted on Tuesday because we did a heavy deadlift Saturday. So, Tuesday I squatted.
Tuesday, yeah.
And it, like, my whole back just still felt gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like you got to try to recover just to be able to do the rest of the workout for the rest of the week because there's still other heavy lifts in the week.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll survive.
Yeah.
As long as he, like, I look at it like, as long as we can stay as a team and push each other and like I can help him in the most so that he can at least hit his world record, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Like if I don't think it'll ever sacrifice one of my lifts at a meet just because now we're on at least different days. So it's not like I have to wrap myself, then go and wrap him in the same day. I don't think I could pull something like that off. But because he's pro day this time around, I think, we'll be able to pull something off.
Mm-hmm. So how do you feel right now going into the meet?
All right. The only lift that I feel like is tanking right now is just my bench.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is.
So why is his bench tanking?
Well, rapping N'dear definitely has made his arms be a little bit more fatigued. One of the things that we did is back his arm training down. So we took out training his biceps for like the last two weeks just because he was so beat up. I did back the volume and frequency down like his rowing motions, same with the pull downs, stuff like that. So overall back accessory is a little bit lower than normal. So that's going to help his bench. That's what we're playing on. But the last couple of sessions have been getting better. Like it's been trending better in the right direction versus like a few weeks prior it was just pretty like just beat down.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's all in an upward swing. But yeah, in terms of like his other lifts, I say his bench has been like the tougher one to try to get on the right track this prep. But with everything, it's going how it should right now, then we'll see how tomorrow goes for sure. So
you think pulling that one bench day out is helping?
Yeah, I think so. Just because
well, you would know. I mean, you're the one pressing the bar.
Yeah,
I can ask Jaden, but he's not pressing the bar.
I think it takes a lot more stress off my body so that I can have more recovery time. Because I just think it was pushing it too much having that fourth day.
Yeah.
Because then it was almost bleeding into the next week.
Yeah. Now, when you say with your lifters in the off season, you want to work on getting them healthier, what does that mean?
So if there's like something that's the main thing I'll do, I'll say this, the main thing I'll do, let's say someone comes to me who's new, right? Now I haven't seen them move. So one thing I want to do is watch how they move. Then from there, we can really pinpoint the problems with mobility, and that's going to correlate to them becoming healthier. So
what do you mean by watch them move?
So I'll watch how they squat, I'll watch how they deadlift, watch how they bench, how they're able to get into position. For example, I'll tell Josh, like when we first started working, one of the things is was his mobility on a sumo deadlift. So I'll watch his hip mobility. How well can he wedge towards a bar? How well is he able to like anchor himself in position? Things of that nature. So some of the things I gave him to do mobility wise off the top of my head was like the tactical frog, to get that with like internal hip rotation. So that really loosened things up for him. And then we'll continue to progress on that. Like we'll do like 30-second holds and we'll throw in like another set. So you're hitting that multiple times a week. Another way you can do the tactical frog stretch is just kicking your feet and putting them closer together, starting off, and then slowly moving them out further as you rock forward and back, and then of course keeping your pelvis in a neutral position. So that really helped as well. And then was kind of like how you would get down to the bar in a sumo. And then also, of course, like he has really big developed quads, but I want to make sure they stay loose. Sometimes they get kind of tight. So another thing we do is like the couch stretch. That really helped a lot. Just basic mobility, like the Cossack squat. Another one would be doing like the incline pigeon stretch, just keeping like the glute med loose. That helped him also a lot. Doing other things that he hasn't like normally done. A lot of unilateral work. So like I'm a big fan of like dumbbell split squats. I'm a big fan of lunges, just getting stronger and more comfortable and like deep ranges of motion with a lot of knee flexion and things of that nature. So
now during this phase, what are the main lifts? You're pulling back on those?
Yeah, so we're not still pushing nearly as heavy in off season as we would in prep, but we still do work up to decent top sets that are relatively heavy for, what he could be lifting. He'd be lifting in a meet. So for example, with like Josh, we'll use him again. In the off season, we'll do volume, like especially the first few weeks coming back from a meet. So like we won't even touch a barbell like week 1 post meet, right? And then we'll ease into doing some more barbell work. So we'll start slowly increasing the weight on those, depending on what variation we pick. So let's say we want to do squats. I mean, when you use camber bar plus 200 pounds and band. So we'll start hammering volume on that and we'll slowly build up. But like the volume is going to be lighter. It's going to, not be as much of a workload. It'll say like sets of 6 to 7. So it might only be like 45-50%, something that someone would use for like a dynamic effort day. And we're just pretty much working on just becoming more efficient in how we move. And I think that's a huge like thing that a lot of coaches sometimes forget is like watching how your athletes actually perform a lift, not just how much weight they're moving during the lift. Like the motor pattern is like the biggest thing. If you don't do it moving for a while, you're going to forget how it feels. And then it's kind of hammering in that motor pattern and becoming more efficient, like how you're doing it once you have that down.
All those things suck to do, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially reps.
Yeah. So the reps suck, right? All the mobility stuff sucks.
Especially when you get to watch.
So you're looking forward to this off season, right?
It's my favorite time.
And is it the same for him then?
Yeah. That's the same. Pretty much, it's very, very similar. I do program a good bit of hypertrophy stuff for all my athletes. Like if you look at like anyone I coach for the most part, they're all pretty, muscular. Not that I'm trying to make people into bodybuilders or anything, but like you have the potential, to have, you hear a bigger muscles, a stronger muscle. Yeah. So the more muscle mass we can acquire, the better we're going to be. Like N'dear is, not a super tall guy, obviously, but like when you look at, I'm not tall either, but when you look at him,
so you can say that, right?
Yeah. He looks a lot heavier than what he weighs, but we put so much tissue on his frame over the last few years, like his body composition has changed entirely. So, you look at guys, I always tell him, he's like, I want to be like 200 plus pounds. I'm like, you're like the same height as Sean Clarita. Yeah. And you weigh like not too far apart. Yeah. So I'm like, you added another 10, 15 pounds, man, it's pushing it. You know what I mean? So it's just things like that, that take consideration. And it's cool to see like people's bodies change and them add on more tissue because it does give you a carryover to your lifts. Sure.
When will that be pulled out as they're prepping for a meet, or will it not?
It will taper out. Yeah. So for example, like now we've already backed down some volume on a lot of their accessory stuff, especially for him. Like tomorrow he's supposed to squat heavy. I have him doing like 3-4 accessory movements, but they're like there's like 2 working sets on each one, maybe 1 on like a couple other ones. So the volume is way lower than what it normally would be versus like if we're just still like 10 weeks out, you might have, 2 working sets, 1 back off set, or you might have like 2 working sets, 1 rest pause set on that second set. So it's a lot of intensifiers and like hypertrophy driven exercises with a good bit of volume. But of course, like the goal is to prioritize the lifts to make sure we're recovering. And I think some people have an emotional attachment to doing more. So they want to do more work and they think that's going to get more results, which isn't the case. It's how hard are you working with what's on your plan? And like both these guys work really hard. So I know I can give them those 2 working sets and they're going to put everything they have into it. Versus if I give them 4 working sets and they're emptying the tank on 4 working sets of leg extensions, that's going to be a lot. So doing, less in this sense is definitely the smart thing to do. And I think, of course, in general, anyone peaking for a meet, you need less volume as the meet gets closer.
Yeah. Now, do you work with them on their nutrition as well?
Yeah, I do N'dear's nutrition. I don't do Josh's.
Yeah. So you eat like trash.
That's why I can't ever make weight.
Yeah. It might be why your bench sucks too, right?
There you go.
Have you noticed a difference?
I noticed a big difference, honestly.
How?
Strength, stamina, the way my body look in general. I look completely different from when I first started. I don't even know how to explain it. I wish I could like bring up a picture of what I used to look like versus now. My performance is different.
So what was his nutrition like before you changed it?
He wasn't eating nearly enough food, in my opinion. He wasn't eating 6 meals a day. It was kind of just like sporadic, especially with his job. I get like he's super busy and he's on call and has stuff going on. But now we just changed it to where he's getting everything he needs that's going to fuel him for training. So we still do 6 meals a day. For example, when he makes weight, so he's like 190 pounds right now, so he's a little bit over 181. But when we'll go ahead and pull food back. So what I'll do is carbohydrates, we'll taper them down as the meat gets closer. But like right now on his rest days, I have him reducing his carbohydrate intake by 25%. So he's still doing 6 meals a day, but we're taking the carbohydrates, reducing them by 25%. So that goes for like berries and stuff too. Anything that's a carb source. And then just like a basic rule of thumb for most athletes, I'll usually take their body weight. This goes for anyone, really. You can multiply by 1.2 to 1.5, giving you like a protein range intake. For him, we keep his protein still a little bit over 200 grams of protein. So we're hitting like 250 grams a day. And then from there, carbohydrates, we manipulate them as needed just to make sure that, hey, we're not getting fat, but we're also fueling performance here. And then we're going to pull them back as needed to make sure we make weight.
So you notice a difference in your recovery.
A big difference in I used to my old training. I felt like trash every day. I mean, as far as eating, the main thing with them was you just need to eat. That was pretty much it. No matter what you eat, you just need to eat. Now, obviously, it's more calculated and things. There's a lot more thought out for me specifically, and that helped me a lot. And
so how do you manage your food prep with what you do? Because you're working all kinds of different shifts, right?
Honestly, I just try to do it I just try to hit the kitchen at least one day a week and just try to bang everything out at the same time. And then I kind of like fresher foods, so sometimes if I get time during the night, I'll just do it during that time. But it's challenging. It's very challenging because my days sometimes I'm doing like 12-hour shifts. I'll do 24-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts. So it really is challenging.
Do you know what your shifts are beforehand?
My regular shift, yes, but I do a lot of overtime in between, so it's kind of unpredictable. But as far as like the hours are predictable, I guess, in a sense. But when you switch from like days to nights, it's kind of hard because your sleep patterns and everything are off. And that's probably like one of the only things that's like hindered right now is just my sleeping. But you know, we work it in.
How do you pivot? How do you pivot the training for that?
So that's one thing I'll tell him is like, hey, I always ask him, every week, how are you feeling? How's your sleep been? How's your recovery been? And take those things in consideration because, if you're up all night and you're working like crazy, then you got to come in the next day to bench heavy or squat heavy. It's going to be hard. And I tell him all the time, like, hey, dude, don't rush into this session. Or he'll say, hey, what's like this week's squat probably going to look like? And then I'll tell him ahead of time before I send him his programming, hey, this is what you can expect. He's like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and take it like on like Wednesday. I'm like, hey, no, don't take it on Wednesday. Like you just lifted heavy like a day before, like, weight, you know what I mean? So I'm just always like, making sure he's getting enough adequate rest and that he's spacing his lifts out enough. Same with Josh, I tell him the same thing. So I just try to work around it as much as possible. Either way, he's going to get the work done. And I know that he's done the hard stuff for the last few years and made no excuse. So, I don't ever sit here and think like, oh man, like, is it going to get the work going to get done? Like my biggest thing is making sure I'm pulling the reins back on him so he doesn't doing too much, So it's just, making sure, his body's responding to how it needs to.
So none of this makes you want to eat chicken and rice?
I usually do eat chicken and rice. It's just like I'm the one who cooks for my family and my wife doesn't do it for us. So it's just a pain to try to make both meals because I got to feed her and my son and then to like make another meal that's actually like more healthy because she doesn't want to eat what I eat. I mean, I try to make at least that we get enough protein intake. So like I came from a very big like pasta family because we're Italian. So like my mom didn't always put like meats with it. Like we'd cook the gravy with the meat and everything, but it always didn't have like high protein with it because the most you were getting was like a link of sausage or something like that. And so now I do like protein pasta because I can't taste the difference and my kid's not going to say anything. But like one of these days, I think I'm going to try to commit to just doing a full like programmed out with nutrition and actually do chicken broccoli.
You're gonna try to commit. You see the disconnect there.
Sometimes,
it'll be worth it because it's been a few times where he's like trying to make weight, and I'm like, hey, dude, I don't know what your diet's like or what you're doing. It's hard for me to like try to manipulate this and like help you out.
McDonald's.
It's the candy. It's the candy that gets me.
So what candy?
Yeah, I love all candy. Gummy bears, Mike and Ike's, I'll eat anything. It's bad. Don't let me in a candy store.
Oh, man. We were so close to weigh-ins right before the last clash, and we was, 3 pounds off, right?
Yeah.
And we literally tried to get them into a sauna, and the place that said they had a sauna did not have a sauna, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that, right before weigh-ins. And we was just, we was using the Uber during that time. So like the next one was like super far away and we was not going to make it in time. It wasn't enough time to get him down to weight. But he also didn't listen with a couple of other things, like sleeping in the bed with like 1,000 clothes on, just trying to sweat and then sitting in the tub and sweating. And
well, I didn't have the tub in my hotel room. I had the shower. So I was in the bathroom with Vaseline on and trash bags, but they had like an automatic fan, so it just took like the steam out of the room. It didn't matter. There's nothing I could do. So it was like I was trying to do that. Then I texted you and I went on the treadmill. I tried to like be on a treadmill, and then I was like, I don't want to like over fatigue myself by spending the next like 6 hours just walking on the treadmill. And then we took magnesium citrate the morning of, and then it didn't kick in till we had the IV bag stuck in my arm, and I was like, oh great, now I feel like I gotta get up. That's tough when you're trying to refeed and handle that.
No, it's hard, you know. And
I told him to take the mag citrate beforehand, by the way.
Way
beforehand. He was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm like, you're only a couple of pounds off, bro.
I'm kind of seeing a reoccurring theme here, by the way. Just saying, you know, there's a lot of pounds being left on the table.
Pretty much. This will be the third meet, I guess, that I'll miss weight if I don't make weight this one.
What do you mean if you don't make weight? You're 3 weeks out.
He just refused to get down. I tell him all the time. Way before then, we'll be at like 5 weeks. I'd be like, Josh, what you waiting? How much do you weigh? I think we should try to taper down a little bit so you can get a little bit closer. He'd be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then I call back and I'd be like, Josh, how much you weigh? He'd be like, all right, well, I'm 215. And I'd be like, Josh, what are you doing? You should be a lot lighter.
You know, the boxes of Mike and Ike's are smaller than the bags. Less calories. You know, there's a tip for you. Just switch from the bag to the box. Save yourself like 150 calories
a day. My kid fruit snacks, I'm like, but the fruit snacks look good for me too.
The little packs too. Like you go through like 10 of those.
I'm like, I could use another one.
Well, it's fruit, right?
That's how I look at it.
Oh man.
So with your training currently, because you came off of that show, I assume you're going to go up a class. Right. So how's your training been, and what have you changed?
So for me, my goal is to go back to middleweight, which was what I was in 2021. So 176 is the weight cap. So right now I check-ins this morning actually, so I was 212 and a half. So I've added a good bit of size and everything, and right now we won't get heavier than 220 pounds at the most this off season. We probably won't go up much more weight than what I am now, just because we've already added like all the size back, and we just kind of want the tissue to solidify. So just being patient and making sure we stay tight and body composition stays in a good spot. But for my training right now, you know, I mean, you see it firsthand, you know, every single day.
You do a very good job of managing your stupidity, right? That's kind of how I put it out there. But you know what? I get it though. I'm probably one of the few people that actually get why you do what you do. But that's how a lot of people want to train. Right. So you're doing it in a calculated way. So how do you lay that out?
So for me, like, for example, I've talked to you about doing this meet here in like 8 weeks, you know, 7 weeks actually. So I'd like to go in and hit, you know, all-time best at the meet. So I'd have to, you know, really dial my training for like a meet competition standard. So that's kind of what I've shifted to. But prior to that, you know, coming off of the show, I would still run a 5-day split. So my training would go Saturday, I hit quads and calves. Monday, I would take off. Tuesdays, back and biceps. Wednesdays, glute and hamstrings. Thursdays, it's been chest, and it's just been chest. And I usually do maybe 1 or 2 shoulder movements as well. Then Friday's off, and then I'm hitting Saturday, coming back and hitting quads. But I also do have a shoulder day and tricep day, which I usually hit that on like a Monday, or I might do it on a Sunday. So right now it's been kind of like flip block if I'm squatting heavy on Saturday or Sunday, depending on if I do that day, or if I end up doing a deadlift the following week. It just kind of depends. It's still a 5-day split, but right now I'm going to move it to a 4-day based off like how I felt this morning, just because like I'm squatting heavy, deadlifting heavy, benching heavy. So I've shifted the past 2 weeks a little bit more towards powerlifting. This is my second week of actual powerlifting, like training, I guess, for my main compound lifts. So for my bench, I'm benching twice a week. So yesterday was like my main bench day where I bench heavy, and then I do chest accessory work. And then I have another bench day later in the week, which I usually do I'll do it on Monday. So where I'll go in and I'll hit shoulders, and then I'll still do tricep accessory work. So my second bench day is a dynamic effort day. So I started this first past week was straight weight for my dynamic effort. And honestly, I kind of started on the lower end. So I only use 225 for dynamic effort for 9x3, 3 sets close grip, 3 sets wide grip, 3 sets comp grip, 45 seconds rest. So that's still probably like 45% of my 1 rep max or so, where I could have probably went a little heavier considering all my numbers are way up right now for bench. Everything's moving great. So I'll keep this going, and then I'll slowly taper out the dynamic effort for bench, just because I need more frequency right now to feel how my bench is supposed to feel, just because it feels foreign still a little bit, like timing of my pressing, getting used to like just all the basic mechanics of a bench press. And as the weights go heavier, it'll help me out for sure. And then I've had these 2 leg days because I blew my quads off, of course, in 2022. And the goal is to bring my quads back up, my legs back up. And like my legs are the biggest they've been. But now I'm running into the issue where I notice my legs are just still somewhat fatigued come around like Saturday, the squat or deadlift. So what I'm going to do is probably combine my back day with my glute and hamstrings in attempts to work out a little bit better, and I can manage fatigue a little bit better, just because now like having 2 full-blown leg days, I'm starting to get, some fatigue around my knees and stuff like that. Quad tendons feel fine. I'm not worried about that. Just making sure I'm not beat up still and still sore, just because everything else is like perfect. My training's great. My sleep is great. My nutrition's great. It's just optimizing my strength right now. And one thing I've noticed about myself, in any meet setting, I have to cut back to a 4-day split just for recovery reasons. In an off season, I can always push 5 days. But once I get closer to a bodybuilding show, so my goal is to do North Americans end of August this year, I'm going to go back to a 5-day split. So right now, based off my timeline, I have this meet May 4th. After that, I had like a few weeks prior to chill out, and then I would start actually focusing on my prep for my show end of August.
Well, what I'm getting at is, as the weights go up, your systemic fatigue increases.
Oh, of course.
Right. So the way you're manipulating those things for those people that are listening is you're managing the systemic fatigue.
Yes.
Right. And when you're in a bodybuilding prep, that systemic fatigue isn't as high. Well, it might be because the nutritional deficit, right?
Deficit, yeah.
So it's probably not fair to say that. It's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. So to basically kind of like manage that a little bit better, what I usually do is for off season, I'll say my main compound movement, right, is going to be hack squats this week. Like, take the meet out of consideration. This has just been what I've done for the last few years or a couple years. Well, I'll have, 2 top sets on that exercise, right? And then I'll come back the next week. I'll hit, another top set on that. And then I'll run that for like 3 weeks, and I'll rotate it out for a new compound lift. And then my other accessory movements are very similar in terms of like, the amount of working sets I'm doing is like 2. And then I get to the next one. So across the week, for example, if I'm training like biceps, I'm probably doing 4 working sets the whole week. And then for triceps, probably about the same, about 4 working sets, maybe 5. Quads, I'm probably doing like close to like 7, maybe 6. So the volume's still not super high. It's still pretty low. So like what's got me through all this to grow and stay healthy and not be fatigued is keeping the volume low. So like it's never increase to like 20 sets per week, or a really high number for hypertrophy, which some people believe, that's going to lead to greater growth. But I've always been like big on like low volume, high intensity, because, of course your body doesn't know how many reps you're doing. That's how hard you have to work. Yeah.
Well, it's what you can recover from.
Yeah.
So now what led to the quad tear? Let's go down that rabbit hole.
So yeah, with the quad tears, it was honestly a freak accident.
Tears.
Yeah, tears.
Yeah, plural. We got to stress that.
Both of them at the same time. Yeah. So honestly, what I think, there's a million different ways I could try to say how this happened, but I did North Americans at the end of 2021. So I got second place there, is 1 spot away from turning pro. It was my 3rd show ever. I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm right here, almost about to turn pro. Like I know what I need to do this off season to come back and be, better. So going into that off season, I got invited to the Ghost Clash, and I'm like, okay, cool. It's the first Ghost Clash 1. And I was like, all right, this will be awesome. Like, I'm going to do this meet, come back, I'm going to do a meet in sleeves. I've never done a sleeve meet. See what I can do. So I started training for it, and I started training for it like the first week of November, if I'm thinking correctly here. I remember I took like 685 for like a set of like 5 and sleeves. And I was like, okay, cool. Like strength's good there. I feel good. But my body weight was still low. I wasn't even 200 pounds. I was like 195. And I still had like striations all through my quads, like still looked like really lean. And I was like still like just, kind of like coming out of like a rebound essentially. So I knew I was still fresh to like, in terms of exposing my body to that kind of stimulus, You know what I mean? So it was still really early on for that. And that kind of could have been what potentially led to me getting injured. So I started training. Everything was going good. So fast forward towards like the end of prep, I'm like 2-3 weeks out from the meet at this point. And I get COVID. I didn't know it was COVID. I remember I went to a sushi place before my last heavy squat of prep. And I just remember getting the food and I was like, man, this food tastes weird. Like something's off, right? Like you just know when you get like bad food that like you might get sick and feel it coming on. I went home and just was throwing up everywhere. I was like, oh my gosh, like I got food poisoning. I can't squat tomorrow. Like I'm like so upset. Like, you know, like my training is ruined. So I'm like, what am I going to do? So I pushed my training back by like 4 days, right? Like I'm sick for like days on end. Just can't keep any food down, feel terrible. So I still go to the gym 4 days later. And I ended up hitting PR. It squatted 771 in sleeves. Easy. Okay, great, right? So then I have to take my other squat. I didn't have enough time because my split got thrown out from being sick. So I had to push my the next squat a little bit sooner. So I was like, you know what? The plan was to take my last warm up in like a meet or like before my opener. That was gonna be my last squat of prep, and that's it. Then take my, you know, over 800 for the all-time world record in sleeves. It's like 804. Beat that at the meet. Well, I'm like, how about I just squat 800 in training? You know, like just take that as my last heavy squat. So I go to the gym, warm up. Everything's moving okay. And I just remember I take like 750, moves decent. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to jump straight to 804. So I remember I just take 804, brace is good, everything feels good. And I come down and I just remember trying to come out of the hole and just both of them blew off. It was the right quad first and left one. And then I just dumped the weight. It was out of a monolith, but it didn't have any straps. So like the spotters couldn't grab it in time or anything. So it just goes to the floor. And I'm laying there on the floor. And the first thing in my head was like, I got to take that again. Like, I got to take this again. So everyone's like freaking out. They're like, don't move, don't move. I'm like, what do you mean? So like, I'm trying to stand up, like I'm pushing myself up off the floor. And even if I go back and watch the video this day, I'm still trying to get up. And I didn't realize, you know, I tore my quads. In my head, I'm like, okay, I'm just hurt, you know, because I go back to like my roots of playing football, like being a wrestler, like get up, like don't be soft, like you're fine. The same thoughts come to my head, like get up. And then I realized I literally can't pick my legs up because there's nothing attached to my kneecaps. And I'm like, okay, like something's off. So I roll over and I sit up and like scoot myself on the ground. Like, it's, you know, it's like I don't have any legs at this point. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like looking down. I can kind of see like my right quad like balled up. And then I could feel my feet and everything, but I couldn't move my legs up, lift them up. And that's when I realized like I tore my quads and they called the ambulance and everything. And it just was like a crazy like experience for me, just because you never think an injury like that would happen to you. And that happened to me at 23. Like, I had just turned 23, so I'm 25 now. But I was like, man, like this is crazy. Like, everything was going good in my training. I mean, the sleeves I had on too were like an older pair because I was waiting on my new ones to come in. Not that it would have made a difference, but it was like
might have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was kind of just one of those things where, you know, I look back, I think my training, I was really pushing like really, really hard. And I try to do it really quick, like a fast turnaround for that meet. I think it just was so much for my body to handle. Like now, like being heavier, like training heavy like I do now, like I feel a lot better and like I'm just recovering better. And I think that timeline, the greatest attribute that changed was just my overall knowledge. Because then versus now, I'm just such a more self-aware individual, especially about my training and my body, and then just overall knowledge as like a coach. Like I really sit down and think things through and then how they would make sense, and I start playing out ahead. And one of the luxuries I'd say too of like this whole thing is just having people to be able to like bounce my ideas off of, and like not just for reassurance in that sense, but like just for like, you know, making sure like the way I'm looking at things is, you know, ideal in a sense. Because I think some people too, they'll kind of just like think they know this or know everything and it has to be this way. But of course, I'll ask you questions all the time about my training. I'll ask Tom, Naomi, you know, for their input even, just to make sure, you know, I'm being cautious now and I'm not risking an injury. But even going back to like my quad tear, of course, I had, you know, the tear, but I had 5 surgeries on top of that, you know. So I tore after tearing both my quads. It's actually funny because I remember you competed at the XBC meet. N'dear competed at the XBC meet at the Arnold that year. And this is like 4 weeks after I blew my quads off, and I told him I'd be there to wrap his knees. And I remember coming to the meet, like I learned how to walk like 3 or 4 days prior to the meet, and I showed up, and I remember like I had like barely any knee flexion in both my quads. I'm like super shaky, and I also had a MRSA infection in my right leg, which was like seeping the whole day when I'm trying to wrap his knees. So my leg's like bleeding and like seeping because the incision busted open from the infection. And I just remember he asked me to come back for deadlift. I'm like, hey man, I can't come back for deadlift. My leg is like the size of a watermelon. Like something's wrong. But and that led to me getting it drained to the doctor the next day, getting another surgery. Then the sutures didn't hold, and they had to fix that. So that led to a third surgery because they tried to let the infection clear. And then after that, you know, I had 2 more, which put me at 5 surgeries total, which was nuts.
Over what period of time?
From January to June of 2022. So it was just a constant, like I started training, you know, and my leg would swell back up. I'd be back in the hospital. And what was annoying was that I'm on antibiotics this whole time. So my gut bacteria is trashed. Like any food I try to eat just would take me an hour to sit down and eat. The ability for my body to digest it was like unrealistic, honestly. So I was really limited what I could consume and what I could try to consume. So even with the doctor, you know, they would be like, try this antibiotic, try that. I tried literally everything possible antibiotic wise, was not getting rid of it. And I remember my last surgery actually, going in there, my surgeon was out of town, and there was 2 new surgeons on call that day who did my surgery, which I think was a blessing in disguise because they actually did a really good job, and they cut my whole incision off from the scar tissue that accumulated. And then they went in, removed the hardware out of my right knee. So the anchor for the tendon, they're like the tendon grew back to your kneecap. So removing the hardware out, took the hardware out. And then since then, it healed really well, but they kept me in the hospital too. Like it was like weeks on end total combined throughout that span, just fighting the infection. And then after the 4th surgery, they kept me in there again for like a week, to wash my knee out. And then they put me on antibiotics to go home. So after the 5th surgery, it was good. You know, they went in, make sure nothing else was in there, hardware wise. And, you know, it's healed up nice since then.
It was wild because you were training out here.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you got another. It's like, oh my God, there's another surgery.
Yeah.
And then it would look all gross as fuck.
Yeah.
You know, you train through that whole process or that whole time though.
Yeah.
You know, where that couldn't have been easy, right? Especially from the beginning because you can't move. Like, how are you getting to the gym?
Yeah. So like getting to the gym, I remember my dad was living with me, right? He was there like to help take care of me and stuff. So, you know, he lives 2 hours away. So he was just up here staying with me until I could like move around my own for the most part. And it was snowing outside. And I remember the doctor telling me, all right, once you hit 17 days post-surgery, you can work out. I'm like, I'm in the gym doing good mornings like day 1. Like I'm planning all this stuff out in my head I'm going to do or that I think I can do.
Good mornings.
Yeah. So I'm like, my number 1 goal is like, all right, get back, get strong, get big again.
Why should anyone join this Discord? Why wouldn't you want to? It's not fake, it's genuine, it's authentic. It's well worth it. The Discord has been nothing short of meeting new people who are incredibly like-minded, giving each other a bunch of ball busting, but also being there to support each other whenever life throws their way. The best part of it for me has also been able to connect with lifters of all levels, help coach, get coached, and also connect with other new fathers who are enjoying the journey of lifting and trying to balance that out. It's the glue that holds all of us together. A common interest toward being people from different walks of life, people who are multimillionaires, these characters and everything else in between, united under one thing, the pursuit of strength.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. But what if you had 2 coaches? What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
Hi, my name is Amber Watson. I'm a personal trainer and power lifter, and over the past couple years, I've had several consultations with Tom Shepard. Tom is always very insightful, and he has a depth of knowledge that he always brings with a really personal approach. So no matter what questions or issues that I've come to the table with, he's able to answer them very specifically and help me find really specific solutions. This includes helping me sort through issues in my diet and nutrition to help me finally start gaining some muscle and some weight, which has resulted in about 40 pounds that I've gained over the past couple of years. This, along with some really specific training advice, has helped me to add over 300 pounds to my total, which has just been incredible. So I highly recommend Tom Shepard if you're looking for expertise or top-notch guidance.
And I remember like 17 days hit and it's a snowstorm hit at the same time. I'm like, I'm going to the gym. Like, I don't care. And the apartment I lived in at the time, you open the door and it takes you outside, and there were stairs and it'd all be iced over. And my legs are locked down braces, like completely straight. So I have no knee flexion. So I remember just grabbing like the handles of the railing and just like scooting myself down the stairs and then like shuffling like super slow to my car. If I would have fell, it would have been awful. And then the driving part was hard because I couldn't put my seat down low enough. So I was sitting sideways, like trying to drive so I wouldn't make my knees hurt. And then I get to the gym and I started training. But yeah, I remember I tried SSB Good Mornings day one, and I was like, oh, I can do like 225 at least. And then I realized I couldn't like bend at the knee at all. So I just kept going forward. And I was like, oh, this isn't a good idea. So I did what I could, a lot of glute and hamstring stuff like RDLs. Eventually could start doing kickbacks, upper body stuff for a long time, a lot of Larson, bench press, lat work, just bodybuilding stuff.
Well, the Larson kind of plays into it.
Yeah.
You can't move your legs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had no other option, honestly. It just was, what I could do. Or if I and then you saw, of course, once like the left leg came out of the brace, the right leg would always be up on a bench, benching the whole time. So it was just always like finding like a way to, work around things until they got to be good. And if I wasn't going to the gym by myself, I have like one of my friends come get me for a while because they're like, you shouldn't be driving. Like, this is like dangerous. So I had a lot of people who were, concerned and made sure I was okay, which that's the biggest thing is like looking back at that and seeing the people who really helped me out and want to make sure I'd be in a good spot, every day, make sure I could get around okay was cool.
The one thing that I noticed when you were coming back was it was the timing.
Yeah.
Because one leg was more jacked up than the other one. So when you'd flex out of the squat, it'd be like all jerky. So having to fix that. Now you're beyond all that now. So how are you mentally when you go heavy on a squat now?
Oh, like I don't even think about my quads.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I don't know. For me, I know people think it's crazy to go raw again and to train like I do, especially after having blown both quads off. Like my left knee, like I know it's fine. The anchor's in there. It's not going, the tendon won't go anywhere. The right one, there's no anchor. So like, yeah, it's a little more risky. But for me, it's something I love. And I feel like, me avoiding that would not be true to who I am. And it just is trying to like play it safe. And I'm just someone who doesn't do that. It's like, all right, cool. I'm going to the gym to train today. I'm going heavy today. This is the numbers I need to hit. And like, for me, it's fun. And if I blew my quads off again, which I pray to God never happens again, but I wouldn't be mad. It would be like, okay, hey, this risk I took, the same as I blew them off squatting, in the past, and, it is what it is. But mentally, I just get under the bar and I just get locked in like I did before, but I'm a lot more controlled with my aggression now. Not that I was like out of control before, but I'm very intentional with how I move, and I'm able to like pinpoint early on in my warm-ups if something feels off to not keep pushing through, or if I need to take time to warm up more, I take the time. So
now, how do you work with these guys to make their intention better?
So I'll use N'dear for example. Like I just remember telling him from the beginning, even up to now, treat the bar like it's 800 pounds, treat 225 like it's 800 pounds, and so on and so forth. Like move intentional with every single thing you do. Now, I'm not saying when you squat, you need to treat 225 like it's 1,000,000 pounds on your back and blast the bar off your back. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to exert that much energy, but still take it serious. Same with your bench warm-ups, the same thing. So it's just being consistent and practicing that repetition over and over and over. So then when you get to the top set, it's just, it feels natural. So then everything moves super smoothly. It feels easy. And there's no thought. So it's just about having a good approach and being mentally locked in, which both these guys do a great job at doing that.
Now, when you guys are in the gym, there's other people training, right? There's other powerlifters around. What are mistakes that you see them making that you'll joke with you? Maybe, yeah, you're like, man, look at this shit. Or better yet, like, remember when I used to do that?
Yeah.
We're too busy trash talking each other after.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people with their the forward movement during the squat, it's like they're doing good mornings during the squat. I'm always like, one day you're gonna hurt his back. And they'll be so far forward, and I'm just like, how are you able to recover from that? Sometimes
it's kind of how you used to squat, though, right?
Yes, a lot until I met Jaden, and it changed drastically. My intensity is completely different. My approach is completely different. Me getting under the bar is completely different. I mean, and like I said, changing, I treat 135 as if I had 800 pounds on my back. I mean, but also I was already intense before, but I'm just a lot more controlled. Like I used to bomb squat, and now is a lot more control. Like you'll see me squat 600, and it'll be slow and controlled, and my explosion out of the hole is way faster. But when I actually put 771 on my back, I'm able to actually adjust myself during the squat. So even in the middle of the squat, I'm thinking about my cues the whole time as I'm squatting, and it actually come up faster than the lighter weight would, because I'm literally talking to myself as I'm squatting.
So walk me through your squat from the chalk, heavy squat, right? So from the chalk bowl to the squat, everything that goes through.
So from the time that I actually, obviously is placement, the whole time, as far as my hands and squeezing the bar with my traps and forcing my head back and getting my hips under the bar a lot more, so that I'm more parallel with the bar. So as I stand up and obviously taking my one brace, I don't really breathe twice. I take a really heavy brace on my first one.
How do you do that?
I just use a lot of interthoracic pressure. I used to be a chest breather, but now I take a lot of pressure into my abdomen. I actually bring my belt up higher just so that it'll be an even tighter brace. And as I go down, I think about starting with my hips versus my knees, because I used to start with my knees first, and then pushing my knees out as I go down, and then loading my quads and my hamstrings as I'm getting to the bottom, and feeling where I am in my squat, and then explode at the top. I might explode out at the bottom.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm readjusting the whole time as I get higher in weight. And just trying to make sure that I hit those cues each time.
What are the cues?
It's just the brace, like I said, getting under the bar and pushing my head back, and making sure that I'm kind of bending the bar as I put it between my traps. And then making sure that I'm lined up in the middle of the bar. And then, like I said, as I'm going down, focusing on just keeping the tension and
tension where?
Tension in my back, tension in my quads and my hamstrings the whole time, and making sure that my brace is tight enough to bear the weight. And as I get to the bottom, making sure that I stay upright, coming back up. Because obviously once I break that brace and I start to move forward, it's harder to control the weight, especially once I get into the heavier weights. So as long as I'm focusing on those things, no matter what the weight is, I'll move it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is 135 is 800, and no matter what you put on the bar, whether you tell me what the weight is or not, I'm gonna move it the same way.
Now, where does he break down if he breaks down?
In the bottom. That's when he loses his brace, or he'll lose his positioning. Like I'll watch his squat when I see anything that goes wrong, is he'll get like a small hip shift in the bottom, and it'll get him out of position, and it really starts to take notice when he starts to go into the concentric portion of the exercise. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, hey, really focus on your brace here before you start the eccentric here. Stay in position and make sure like you're not letting your hips like get shifted at all. So like if he can just like stay locked in, it helps him tremendously. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier.
How is he going to avoid the hip shifting? Just by forcing the knees harder?
No, so sometimes he'll get started and just be more forward on his toes. So he won't.
So he's starting wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
And which is leading to him being out of position in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's able to hinge like he needs to at the hip and really stay locked in that same position the whole time, then he'll be good. Obviously, he's more of a quad dominant squatter if you look how he's built, how he squats. But obviously, of course, if he gets too far forward when it's that much weight, it's all going to go downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what I was going to say too is one thing is with how much he squats at his stature, it's hard to stay tight and stay locked in position when you have that much bar whip. You know, like there's not many guys squatting almost 800 pounds or more at his height and stature. So that's one thing I think of like, okay, we're having a really hard time staying in position here. And he's like super fast twitch dominant. So what I've done is just cut down the amount of reps and gave him a little bit more sets. So like more singles, more doubles, and that's it. Versus me having him do like, all right, yeah, you're going to do like 750 for 4 today or for 3 today. It's super hard to do that. And for him to stay in position, it's not that he's not strong enough to do it. It's a lot, you know?
Yeah. Where does he break down?
It must be nice.
Yeah. Where...
So Josh, I will just use this past squat for example.
Oh, this sounds like it's good.
So, like his best squat to me is 700, but I'm like, all right, Josh, like you're stronger with the squat more than that. It's just about how we're going into the squat. Like any small thing that breaks down, it's going to cause you to miss the weight, especially when everything's like maximal at this point. So, for example, he was squatting more with the bar, high bar for a while. And he's also like really quad dominant squatter, and it would get forward. And when he had the bar high bar, he was having a really hard time staying upright. Like his back would just want to get folded. So I was like, all right, let's move the bar down your back a little bit, not completely low bar because that's changing a lot of things all of a sudden. Just move it down to like where it's about in the middle, and I'll just put us in a better spot as long as it feels comfortable. And then from there, just making sure we don't get too far forward. So sometimes we'll get a little bit forward. And it'll just cause him to collapse, like coming out of the hole. His knees will start to cave a little bit. And I can see his feet as well. He'll have a little bit of inversion going on. So we'll try to prevent those things and just work on his hip stability. So one thing I hammered this past time is his unrack, because he would pick the weight like kind of violently and stand up with it. I was like, just be real patient, ease that weight out of the rack. The reason being is because one, it gives your body more time to adjust and like get used to that weight and that load, but also lets the weight settle. So when he's able to do that, the weight's going to be a lot more comfortable on his back, and the weight's not going to want to shift him around. So like his hips, like in his squat this past week, were like going back and forth. Like he couldn't really find his brace and keep him in position. I'm like, just relax and like pick the weight slow. And I always tell athletes, like, pick the weight with your hips, don't pick the weight with your back. So like some people want to pick the bar of the rack with their back versus picking with their hips and standing straight up. So that's one thing we worked on, and that's where he was breaking down, primarily in his squat right now. But that's it. It's nothing like that's detrimental, but it's something that, needs to be fixed if he wants to hit, 730 or more at the meet.
Well, I would tend to agree that most lifts are missed with the setup.
Yeah.
So what would be the optimal setup that you would advise somebody to do?
For squat,
assuming they're just picking it and they're not walking it out. We'll go both, but we'll start with just the monolift, just picking it. Because I assume that's what these guys are doing.
Yeah, they both have the monolift. Yeah. So the biggest thing I'll say is this is, of course, if you're squatting low bar, make sure the bar's in good positioning. Make sure the monolift arms are where they should be, because the biggest thing is if you can't create enough thoracic extension in your upper back, your chest is going to want to collapse. So wherever you're setting the bar is going to be a huge, huge factor. So getting in a good position with that, make sure you're cranking the bar in, squeezing it tight, creating thoracic extension in your upper back. And then from there, just making sure your feet are in a proper alignment. So like one thing with people is that sometimes their feet will be too far back from them. And what often you'll see is that they're picking the bar with their back. They're like doing like a small good morning out of the rack. So making sure your feet are centered under you. And then from there, just standing up with the weight. So what taught me that was being a multiply lifter. When I was at Westside, that's how I learned to do that, because I was trying to pick 800 plus pounds out of the rack with my back. So being able to just pull my hips directly under me, be really patient, it helped me a ton. And that's what made everything be so smooth. So for like the common person, if they're able to just pull their hips under them, and then they might have to think about squeezing their glutes, honestly, to get that activation, it's going to change things. And people too, they won't want to have their pelvis won't want to be in a neutral position. They'll have a lot of like anterior pelvic tilt. So pulling their pelvis into a neutral position and standing straight up just makes things like 10 times better.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can feel that, and then on top of that, creating enough intra-abdominal pressure out into their obliques and creating it between them and the belt, that alone is also going to make it way more stable. So it's just a matter of getting the air, creating that brace, and then standing straight up.
Now, what if they have to walk out?
So if they're walking the weight out, I would still say like mimic those same steps. So still do those same things, but the only thing I would change on that is their breathing. So if you're walking weight out, you're going to lose a little bit of air. So stand up with that big air, and then from there, I think 1, 2. So 2 steps. So I always tell athletes 2 steps, at the most 3. It might be a third step in there to try to readjust if you need to get comfortable. So they'll do 1, 2. The steps are really small. Then the third one if needed. And then from there, before you begin the eccentric, like take another air in and try to squat from there. But the same cues apply for an actual squat. It's just the walkout. People will lose their brace. And I tell them, like, you're not going to be able to get the same kind of brace that you're going to get before unracking 800 plus pounds as you will walking out 800 plus pounds trying to get your air then. Just because the weight's on top of you, like you're being compressed, you know? So get as much as you can before the bar comes out of the rack and try to get in position, and then just try to keep that, which is hard, obviously, you know, once, you know, you do 1 rep and then go into multiple ones. But before 1 rep begins, like try to like be perfect.
Now, how do you wrap him?
Like technique based?
Yeah.
So what's the brand of yours? I always forget.
Is Outlaws.
Yeah. And they're like more of a casting wrap, whereas like I usually use the slingshots, or his new Outlaws that he bought that he doesn't use are like the slingshots. So with his casting wraps, I usually start at the top. I have him mark his leg of where he feels the most comfortable with where he wants it to start, and then also where he wants it to end. And then I'll go from there, and usually it's about 3 wraps down. I'll do an X formation, and then it'll be 3 wraps back up. And as I wrap around, I try to take all the tension out the whole time. So
now with the X, is that over the knee or behind the knee?
Over the knee. And then usually, because I was always taught that you lay across the knee so that you don't pull somebody's knee off. I don't do that anymore. I crank it across and then crank it down. Like, he wants them as tight as possible, so that's what I give him. Like, I feel like I put the most strength into just pulling it so that it's got so much tension wrapped up around it that when he goes down, it'll have enough force to stop him, and then he'll usually just use his quads to get himself back up.
Have you always done it like that?
Me?
Yeah.
I can't even remember how I used to wrap myself, honestly. Once I stopped wrapping once I stopped wrapping myself, I pretty much forgot the technique after that point, because it was just nowhere near as tight as his at all, or Jaden's. I never knew what it felt like to even have tight wraps like those. I always had casting wraps, but it was nowhere near as much tension. I mean, when every time he wrapped my knees, I always have scabs. Even well after training. It actually sometimes feel like he pulled my knee out, even though he don't. But it's, I don't know.
Have you played around with different styles of wrapping? At some point, the wrap's kind of irrelevant. It's how tight it can go and what the style of it actually is.
I don't think I ever truly played around with styles of wrapping. I pretty much learned from like my old team, and I pretty much just took it from them, and then I kind of wrapped myself after that, and then once I met them, they pretty much had their own style, so I just pretty much went with it for the most part. Even though it probably would have been smarter to learn my own style of wrapping, but so far I just got these 2 amazing people, so I never really had to worry about it anymore. So I'm pretty sure one day I'm probably gonna have to learn it again.
I don't know what that's saying about you, man.
One day I'll disappear.
Yeah.
I told him just at least put me in like the biography once he gets one. I mean, I've used different techniques on myself. I try not to change anything for him just because I don't want to screw him up. Like, just because we don't wrap that, like, we only really wrap it when we're actually in prep. So it's like, I know what I can feel when I do it to myself. So sometimes if I want to take the X out and I just do straight wraps around my leg just to crank it on a little bit tighter, I'll do that. But I'll only do it to myself because I don't know how it's going to feel to him. And I don't know if he'll be able to let me know if it was the weight that made something happen or if it's the wrap itself. But like, I always make sure with mine and his wraps that like, it's almost like you're mowing the lawn where you kind of go over half of or like close to half of the last rap so that there's no gaps. Because once a gap happens, it's like the rap's irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, it also it's a when you see it, right? The first thing I see if you see a video and there's like knee popping through the rap, it's like the rapper sucks. Right. So it's you, right? So it's not going to be him that's going to get the blame for that. No one's ever going to say, man, he doesn't know how to rap because it doesn't work that way. It's like, who the hell rapped him? Right. So
I find myself like when we watch new, because I feel like rapping, people have been wearing sleeves a lot more for the past couple of years that I've been powerlifting now. And it's like, I feel like rapping's finally starting to come back more outside of geared lifters. So like when I watch people learning how to rap or rapping themselves, it's kind of hard not to want to like put an input in and be like, I think you could do this better if you did this. But then it depends, because sometimes they'll go to a meet and there'll be somebody there who actually knows what they're doing to rap them so they can at least pull off whatever squat they're going to do.
What do you see that they're doing that's screwing them up?
Sometimes I feel like they're not tight enough. Like you can watch a video and it just looks so loose on the raps.
I know what you're talking about, especially if they're real strong raps.
Yeah, but it's like a lot of them are already strong squatters, so like they don't really notice the difference, I think, between having their sleeves on to the raps. Whereas like my raw squat's horrible. It's like we barely got 535, 545, and it's like my left leg just shuts down. But when I have my wraps on, I could squat up to 700. Like it feels comfortable, and I don't really have that same like leg pain. So it's like when I was prior to Jaden, when I was like looking for coaches, I'm like, I don't raw squat the same as how I rap squat. So if you don't know how to handle a rap squatter, like it's going to be hard for you to really know what to do with me, because it's like a 200-pound difference.
So how did you manage that with that big carryover? Because now he goes into the off season, there's a big deficit.
So I made sure like I put on his plan and even his plan, or any guys I have or girls who train in raps. Hey, like use your sleeved 1 rep max for percentages for basing things off of. So like, for example, if someone uses their rap to max, like it's going to be
well, him especially. There's a problem.
Like he's going to stand up and get stable. So I mean, it's just a matter of being like very clear, like my instructions, like what I want them to do. And then of course, like it still applies, like, hey, like what are Josh's weak points? What do we need to bring up? So it's just been hammering those weak points and continuing to build his raw squat. So one thing that he was not very good at was good mornings. Like when we first started, like that's one thing that he was just, it was hard for him. And we've been hammering on those, working on those, and he's gotten better and better at them. And a lot of it too was just figuring out, like, of course, like how the movement should feel. And that goes for a lot of other accessory things we threw in. So just getting more efficient at those and becoming better at them. And, you know, he started to get a good carryover.
So I assume you love the good mornings too, because all I see now is all this mobility crap, you know, and all this stuff that you suck at.
Yep. They're my favorite thing to do outside of deadlifting.
I was about to say, he also don't mention that he was shot in his leg as a kid. That got a lot to do with his squat too.
So when that happened?
Right around my junior year of high school. So I had a 45 go behind my kneecap. It went through my femur, shattered the tip of it, and then it came out through my calf.
How'd that happen? There's got to be a story here. It's either brutal or stupid.
No, it was one of those like dumb situations. Somebody else had a handgun in the room. Like we were all trained to handle like firearms. And when I came back up from getting changed and we were all hanging out for the next day that we were supposed to go shotgun shooting, not handgun shooting, the magazine was already out of it, but the chamber wasn't racked back. So then when I came in and I sat next to the kid who was the second person to have it, I said, you know, check the chamber. And I had both my legs like stacked on top of each other. And I was sitting the same distance we are now. And when I said check the chamber, I kind of just turned away. And then next thing I know, I just smelled like, it smells like burnt sausage, in my opinion, like gunpowder when you're that close. And I got up, I walked out of the room, and then I sat down in front of the couch and I looked at my leg and there was a big hole in my leg. I like pulled my pants up and I was
you didn't know?
Oh. No. So like, and I've said this to people before, like it happened.
Right, he's trying to stand up with two blown quads. You blow your fucking leg off and you don't even know it.
So it's like, it was a full metal jacket round. So like when I got up to walk out of the room, in the back of my head, I kept thinking like, I heard it, so like must have grazed my leg, or maybe it went through my foot and it's like all the way down, or it went through like my heel. And then when I finally like sat down and then processed it, like when I looked at the hole, it was just like a hole right behind my knee. There was like the skin was like peeled over like a flower. And then I was like, okay, now where did it go?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I looked at my calf, there was like a tunnel that went through. So like the skin was down and there was skin above. And then there was no hole out of my pants that I had. So it just kind of hit the pant and then fell to the ground.
Mm.
So it was like, and that's when I ended up starting powerlifting, because I went back from, I think before that, I was barely even like doing any crazy lifting. I think I was doing like, not bodybuilding. It was like physique model type stuff. I was just doing like all body groups and trying to do whatever. And then when I came back, I was like, all right, I think I want to actually get strong in like squat, bench, and deadlift. So then I met with like some powerlifter people, and that's how I built back. But it's been like a whole recovery with this leg, because I had screws in there, and then they were cutting my IT band, so they removed the screws. And then a guy at the gym was like, oh, you're going to get scar tissue if you don't like take a softball to it. And I didn't know I had stitches still inside. I thought there was just the stitches on the outside. So I took a softball to it, and then it created like a ganglion cyst or whatever of like joint fluid. So like every time I would flex my quad, a big bubble would just form, or like right where they cut through to actually get the screws out. So I went back to the doctor and I was like, I don't know what happened. I guess the stitches just broke on their own. Like, oh, so like, hold on, we'll stitch you back up. You'll be all right. So then after that, like whenever I squat heavy, that's the only thing I've noticed is like, even after a meet, like post meet, like that whole like week after, it like sucks to like go up steps and stuff. It almost feels like, my legs just like dead. Like the whole, it's just like the left side of it where the IT band is, it just kind of like bums out. And that's the same reason I feel like sometimes on my squats, like I try not to squat when it rains, because I feel it the most when it's like a rainy day. But yeah.
Crazy story.
Any other stupid shit that you've done?
Nah, I think that's the worst.
So walk me through, because we went through the squat, walk me through the bench. Like, how would you have people set up for their bench?
All right, so like these two bench like completely different, for example. So with N'dear, he's a tricep dominant bencher. So he benches very similar to like how I bench and how I set up on the bench. So for example, usually how I look at the bar is where I'm going to set my hand. So like I'll look at the rings. So I put my pinky on the ring, which is still kind of wide for a guy my stature, but it's still of a closer bench. So I'll set my pinky up around on the ring. That's where I normally grab. And then for me to set up on my bench is like a whole thing. So I'll get up like on my upper back, and then I'll pull my feet up on the bench, create the upper back tightness. And when I say create upper back tightness, I'm not saying like completely retract your scapula entirely. So people will retract their scapula entirely, and like it does not allow like your humerus to move or your shoulder joint how it should. So like for like the most like natural movement from like a biomechanic standpoint, I would say would be just to let your like slightly retract your scapula, but also let it to like depress down into the bench. So then you're in a position to where like you can also like fully recruit your chest as well. And that's what I noticed for me. It helped my bench a ton. Like I would be like retracting my scapula way too much, and my chest was like out of the movement entirely, I felt like. And it just would become like this like tricep movement. That was it. It's like when I quit like focusing on that and then actually thinking about like creating that tightness in my lats and like driving them down towards my hips almost, it made my bench feel 10 times better. So just properly knowing how to set your upper back versus some people just think like squeeze your traps. They're just like traps. I'm like, that's not lat tightness. That's not getting your back tight. So just thinking about those cues for your actual back. And then in terms of leg setup, that's like the most important thing I think for a lot of lifters, is because people will sacrifice their leg drive and they're losing like 30 to 50 pounds off their bench immediately. So for me, I bench with my feet on the floor. So one thing I think about is almost like doing a hamstring curl when I put my feet on the ground. So my hamstrings are sore and fatigued, and my glutes are every bench day just because I'm squeezing and flexing them so hard. So I put my feet flat on the floor, and then before the bar ever comes out of the rack, I'm pushing the floor away from me. And when you see people's butt come off the bench, it's because they're pushing down into the floor versus pushing the floor away from them. So I always tell people, push the floor away from you. Or I think like, hey, think of like Mario and you slip on a banana peel. Like your foot's going that way, not going down. So I just kind of tell them to mimic that or think of that. And then of course, squeezing their glutes and hamstrings. Some people you'll see like they get happy feet and move their feet around when the weight gets like heavier and they get amped up. So still lock your feet in play, then also just drive your knees out, which will like get their hips tighter, flex their glute med more automatically, just creates more stability. So that's what I tell them to do. And then for people who bench on their toes, like Josh benches on his toes, for example. So he has more of a really big arch compared to like N'dear. So he sets up a little bit differently where he's getting his chest to like a high point that N'dear can't, or I can't even. So he's able to arch really, really hard. I'm like, dude, use that towards your advantage. No one cares how much you arch on your bench, like how much can you press, and how much is getting passed. So he has a really big arch and he benches a lot wider than me or N'dear. So what I tell him to do when he's pressing like on his toes, because he's on his more like midfoot toe area when he benches, I tell him drive his heel down towards the floor when he's pressing off his chest. So like before like the bar comes out of the rack, he's still creating that tension the same as someone would with their feet flat on the floor. They're pushing the floor away from them. So like we go back to like if your feet are flat on the floor and you're pressing off your chest, you're just amplifying that push to the floor. So same if Josh is benching, right? He's going to drive his heel down towards the floor even harder when he goes to press the bar off his chest. So just thinking like almost of just for driving a car, like Stacy Burr would always say, like gas pedal, like smashing the gas, like driving your heel down. So that's kind of the same thing I tell him to do for bench.
Now, when do they get their air?
So for air, I usually have them, of course, take that before the bar ever comes out of the rack. And what I tell both of them or any of my other athletes is like, hey, take that air in and try to keep at least for 2 reps. So like if we're doing a triple, 1, 2, third rep, get another air, and then there you go. But the problem is, I think with some people is that they'll get 1 air and they'll try to hold it for like a set of like 5. Like you're not going to make it the whole set. You're going to pass out.
Yeah.
So that's one thing is knowing how to put your air in there accordingly to your rep scheme for that set. If it's a 1 rep max, of course, 1 big air and keep that brace, but you're still filling up, the same way as you would for a squat. But of course, you're keeping your chest at a high point. So like if you don't have like a bunch of air that's creating intra-abdominal pressure, it's not the worst thing. If some of it goes to your chest and your chest rises, it's not it's only going to help you in the sense of getting the bar to a higher point versus pressing down at a lower point. So it's just those things. Yeah, just taking the air in like you need to for your set and just maintaining it throughout the.
Now where will they break down?
So with N'dear, I mean he has a strong bench, but it's just I never know I'm going to get some weeks. I mean he might go in there and just I don't like some weeks he'll go in there and he'll blister like like 420 easy, right? And like for multiple sets, like go run it for like doubles or something. And then like some weeks it's just like, okay, like why is 385 moving like it's 450 pounds? So it's just one of those things where it's just finding consistency. But with him, he'll break down a lot of it. I honestly feel like it's sometimes how he sets up with his lats. Like one side will be way tighter than the other, and one arm will lag. And when after he gets worked on, it's way better, and then his lifts look way more fluent. And then with Josh too, like if he's like just beat up or his bench is just not coming along very well, I mean he'll just break down like top. Like we'll do like so this prep what we did a lot of close grip board press, and like that's something else he's like really struggling with. But it's helped his bench show a lot. So just helping a lot of lockout, and if he misses, it's like halfway up.
All right, so walk me through the deadlift now.
So,
we'll go pick whatever you want first, sumo or conventional, it doesn't matter.
All right, so both these guys pull sumo. I pull sumo as well, so I'll just go ahead and start off with sumo. So with both of them, what I have most of them do for out of meet prep, so as they're ramping up for deadlift, I have them pull off like a 1-inch mat versus pulling off the floor just to save a little bit of fatigue. And then of course as the meet gets closer, we'll take the mat out for the last.
So the plates are on the mat.
Yes. Yeah, pull up blocks. Yeah. So we'll pull the blocks out as the meet gets closer. So we're like working at like a lower point. Then we're eventually on the floor. So for sumo deadlift, what you're doing is course finding a good shin angle. Like it'll be between 90 to like 45 degrees, just kind of depending on like your built and stature. So you just want like a vertical shin angle to really sum things up. In terms of setting your feet up, look at the lines on the bar, on a deadlift bar. Kabuki bar is going to be a little bit further out than a Texas deadlift bar or a Rogue. So just finding that line, lining up on it, and then of course from there, just thinking about wedging your hips closer to the bar. And this comes back to like what I talked about earlier, is like where your pelvis is positioned. Some people will automatically try to pull sumo with a anterior pelvic tilt, and it puts them in a weird spot versus like keeping it like in a neutral position. So if they can keep your pelvis in a more neutral spot, they're able just to go down and really grab the bar and just stay in better alignment. So the number one thing I tell athletes who want to get into sumo is like, look at your knee travel. Like, you want to get a little bit more of lateral knee travel, so pushing your knee out just to wedge your hips close to the bar. And that's one thing that's just going to fix things like that versus trying to automatically correct wedging your hips if they absolutely can't, because it takes time to get that range of motion and mobility. So as we continue to progress on that, them getting position becomes easier. And then, of course, like learning how to move a sumo deadlift and understanding it's not a conventional deadlift, because you'll see so many people want to do a sumo deadlift and try to like conventional deadlift sumo.
Well, explain what you mean by that.
So they'll start with the hips further back from the bar, and they'll be bent over at the chest, and they'll just do a conventional deadlift with their feet spread apart, essentially.
Yeah.
So it looks crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not efficient at all. So that's when I tell people, like, no, like, but then you tell them that, and then they try to do the next extreme and leg press the bar off the floor, like squat a sumo deadlift. And I'm like, you're putting your hips in a position they're not supposed to be in. Because if you start with your hips too low like that, first thing they do is they shoot back up in position they naturally want to be in. So like one of the things, I tell people is, say, okay, if you absolutely cannot find where your hips need to be, there's two things I'll have someone do. You can do a chair deadlift and have someone who knows how to put your hips in a good position, or a coach. Or, if I'm working with someone, for example, I'll have them, do a chair deadlift where their hips need to be for a starting position, and we'll build from there. Now we know where we need to be at, and then we can mimic that now into their actual deadlift. We can do that as a warm-up, or you can do it as an accessory movement. Another thing is have someone do one rep, and then they come back down for the second rep where their hips are at will more likely be where they need to have their hips for the actual lift. So it takes them maybe one rep or two reps to find that starting position, but when they do, it's like, okay, cool, mimic this next set. And then like the more advanced the lifter is, the more like technical I can get and really break things down. But once they're wedging their hips close to the bar, of course in that process they're making sure they're creating intra-abdominal pressure the same thing as they would in a squat.
When?
Before they go down to the bar. Yeah. So if I'm, I pull hook grip, mixed grip, it doesn't really make a difference. You're creating that pressure, and then you're going down, grabbing the bar. I always recommend lifters go down one hand at a time, just because they can really take that extra second and just get set up and create that lat tension throughout each arm individually. So like you just got to be able to really find your lats and find your upper back tightness. So like I'll just do a couple different cues myself with my upper back and arms to like feel like, okay, hey, there's a connection there. Like this is after I set my feet on the floor before I pull. And then from that point, I'm able to go down, grab the bar, set my hook grip, create external rotation all the way up through my elbows into my shoulders, which will pull my chest up more. So another thing I hammer is like getting your chest up. So the first thing I tell people is like, hey, like make sure your shoulders are back. Don't like retract your scapula, but like pull your shoulders back in a sense to where they're in a good alignment, like with the rest of your body and the bar. So like they're not like over the bar, you know what I mean? Like almost directly like in line the bar, or a little bit behind even. To pull, and it just makes everything way more vertical. Like if you look from the side, everything should just be lined up like smoothly, and your chest is like in an upright position versus being bent over, which is for me, it's hard because I got short arms. So like if I really want to get like upright, I gotta like really wedge in there, and that's one reason why I pull with a dynamic start, is just to be able to optimize that even more.
Mm-hmm. So where do they break down?
I break down everywhere. That's it.
So with N'dear, when he breaks down, like he sent me his last deadlift, and he's like, "These are so bad, I'm not even going to send them to you." Mm-hmm. I'm like, "They can't be that bad." So he sent them to me, and they moved pretty good. He just like lost his grip was like letting off at the very top, right? He pulls mixed grip, so we just needed to fix that, and everything else other than that moved fine. With Josh, he's also been learning hook grip this prep as well, so we've been really trying to hammer that, get that down for him. But if he misses, is that he'll just rush reps sometimes. So like he'll blister the first rep, then his second rep will just be real explosive, and sometimes let the slack come out of the bar and just rip into it versus like kind of pull the slack and ease back into the second rep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just for him finding that slack and keeping it the whole time, especially going to the next rep. And then from there, just being able to be consistent with his chest positioning.
How'd you go about learning the hook grip?
It took some time because I used to, when I first tried to start to learn it, because we were just like going back and forth about it, I kept trying to like stick my whole finger around and then grab my thumb. And I was like, this just isn't working. I just felt like it was just ripping my skin off.
Mm-hmm.
And then weights would get heavy and it would just fall out either way. And then I could always go back to mixed grip because I never had a problem with it, other than like every once in a while I might lose something. But then I want to say it was like one of our last conversations, like I finally figured out to like just barely put my thumb around. And then it was once you like twist, it makes such a difference on like locking in, because then your like lats are tight and then you're upright and it just feels like it's sitting in your hand. It's not all the weight's on your thumb at that point. So like the motion feels so much better.
So you were carrying it too high.
Yeah, I was just really shoving it in there because that's what I thought you did. And that's why I was so confused why it took people so long to do like hook grip when they would go up there. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just stick your hand around it and pull it off the ground.
Yeah. It's just about getting the bar in a good position in your hand. Like, basically people will set the bar too deep in their palm and they'll smash it in there. And what happens is they'll just clamp down on it and squeeze. And the bar is going to like start to move no matter who you are. Like, you can have the strongest grip in the world. It's going to tear your hand. And when it starts to spin, like, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, like, they don't lock in like those last few fingers. Like, what I have people do is like, once they set the bar in their hand, I tell them to pull the slack out of the bar, and then that'll automatically move the bar kind of down lower in the fingers. And then from there, they're just squeezing their thumb. And then, of course, when they grab the bar with their thumb, come across horizontally and not straight on. So from there, it makes it to where you're able to set your hook grip and lock in your thumb. And then once you create external rotation, you're able to lock in like your pinky and then like the rest of your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like he was saying, you're able to lock in your lat tightness. Your chest is up now. Your back's tighter. Like, it all goes hand in hand. And once you do that, like, you're not going to drop the bar as long as you have like a semi-strong grip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with their squat tomorrow, if it's 3 weeks out, is that the heaviest squat that they're going to have?
Yeah. So he went ahead and took his squat earlier this week.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest squat he's going to take this prep. The same for him. This is his, biggest squat he'll take. Yeah. We have time to do one more heavy squat, but it wouldn't be beneficial in my eyes for either of them, especially how this whole training has went. Cause we know what we need to do at this meet, like what goal we need to hit. Like, this is what our goal has been for this last two meets. Yeah. So hit a big squat tomorrow. And then our next heavy squat will just be our last warm up. So, let's say we open up like, 760 this meet, right? All right. We'll take our last warm up. We'll say it's 700. So that would be it. And he shuts it down. So it'll take one more squat. It'll be really easy. Same with Josh.
When's the last deadlift then?
So his last deadlift will be next week.
Mm-hmm.
He'll pull that next week, and he'll pull that next week.
All right. And then the last heavy bench is what?
We'll do that. It won't be a week out. It'll be the week before. Mm-hmm. So we'll hit another heavy bench. I mean, it lines up perfectly, especially for him, because we just went heavy this past week with a few singles. Same for him. So that'll be the best thing to do, because in the following week, we can just hit an opener and call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with your bodybuilding background, when they go into the off season, how do you ramp up that volume? Do you have the week off and you just hit it, or do you ramp it up?
So I know he wants to train like right away.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's like, I'm ready to be back in the gym tomorrow. I'm like, so what I'll do is just be like, all right, cool. Like, take this. I give them 2 days. I do for both of them. I do this for almost all my athletes. For a meet, I say, even the week of the meet, all right, here's 2 days to go into the gym. Don't take the whole week off. I want you to still move. So I'll send them like 2 blood flow days. It'll be like some banded work, some reverse hypers, some cable accessory work, nothing fatiguing. Mm-hmm. Like 2 sets of 20. And these are at like 60% intensity. So they're pretty easy, nothing too taxing, and make sure we can get in and out in under an hour.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. And then the week after the meet, I do the same thing. I put 2 days on there that are very similar, but they're a little bit shifted towards like actually like pushing intensity a little bit more. So probably like 75%, maybe 80% depending on the movement. And then from there going into the next week, it still will be no barbell work. So this will be the week after the meet, or the second week after the meet, essentially. There's usually still no barbell work for the most part. There might be like some benching, for example, but it's a lot of bodybuilding stuff because I kind of want to give them that time to recover and not load their spine any more than I have to. Just let their CNS become in a better spot and just let their body just, get over any like potential nagging injuries they may have or being beat up at all.
Now, how high will that volume pull up as far as work sets? After those, you get through those weeks, then you start scaling up.
Yeah. So depending on the body part. So let's say we're training legs. So I have for him, for example, I have his training split to where he has his glute and hamstring on his deadlift day, and then I have him doing his quad work on the days he's squatting. So quad wise, it'll probably work up to no more than 10 working sets in a session, and that's like it. I think that's plenty, and then that's not counting his squatting either.
Yeah.
So take that in consideration. That'll be more than enough. Then sometimes I might push the volume up a little bit more with him, just because I know he can't handle some of that in the off season, depending on the movements. I'll just ramp like his back training. I'll bump it up a good bit more, so he might end up hitting 12 working sets in a session, which is still plenty. I think for hypertrophy and recovering, and still being able to push other lifts as they get heavier as well.
What were some of the things that you've changed over the past 2 years that's made a huge difference?
As far as training goes, or
training, nutrition, recovery, all of it.
Just nutrition, getting the right amount of protein in general has made a big difference as far as like energy and recovery. Also body work. So I go to 2 different people. One of my guys is Richard Sharon, and he does like a lot of my cupping and scraping. And he does like electrotherapy too, also in the same token. So he does a lot of that for me. And then my regular, not regular, but my deep tissue massages, I go to a girl, she does recovery. And her name is Danica, and she does a lot for me. I'd probably use that way more than I've ever. And then I also do the chiropractor, which helps me a lot to just keep my body in great shape in order to even do most of his things. And then also just a split as far as the 4 days versus I used to go 5 days a week when I was with my old training team, which was like the worst ever for me. Like the 2 days off felt like I just never had a day off ever, and we was just pushing heavy all the time. We would push maxes a lot, and that's why when I first came in with them, I was like always ready to go for a new PR, because that we would do that a lot. We'd go like 3 weeks, and then we'll go into another PR and just see where we end up at. And by the time we get to competition, I didn't try to max out like 3 or 4 times getting towards competition. And then, I think that doing off season in general has helped me a lot as far as way better in recovery, because we're not anywhere near my max, but we also is still like pushing, and it helps me a lot technically, especially with like the bands and the chains and everything, and especially with my squat, because I had a lot of technical issues in the beginning, but once we actually started using the different band tension, it helps me as far as placement and everything, and as far as tension. And then just Jaden.
What about yourself?
Yeah, before we linked up, I used to do I had like I would use like Russell's like cookie cutter workouts as like my off-season workout, and then I had a conjugate one that I would use in like meet prep. It was just a 12-week one that I kept. I used it probably like at least for 3 meets prior to all of us working out. And then N'dear helped me a lot with fixing my squat, because he's right there with me, so we're able to fix a lot of issues immediately, and then also help me with my confidence, because I had really bad confidence in the squat because I was always worried that something would go wrong. And then I've also had a meet before where I bombed out because I had like a bad rap, like a really bad rap. So when we started, working out together, he really helped push my squat, which took me from like, just with Jaden's coaching and then his cues and then also mentality, I went from 5, I think I did at the meet that we were at together. It was like 5:30 or something, or not even.
Somewhere around there.
And then now we're in the 7s, and it feels comfortable too. It doesn't feel like when I get under the weight, like I'm just gonna crumble, like break.
He was very nervous when I met him.
Yeah.
A very, very nervous person.
Mm-hmm.
He would be in the meets just asking the judges what he should do next.
What should I do? I don't
Not
know.
not
Yeah.
his own knowledge, but the judges. As in, he'll do like 10-pound jumps, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
leaving a lot of weight on the table, brother.
Mm-hmm.
And his mentality during squatting was horrible. I mean, he was pretty much making love to the weight. I'm like, how can you ever get to a heavy weight making love to it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it just had to figure out how to get to that dark place. And me talking to him the whole time, I already had a mentality prior to Jaden, but he heightened my mentality. But like I played a lot of sports, and I know what it is to like be in championships and everything, and where you have to take yourself in order to get to be that person that everybody is counting on. So I already kind of had that mentality, and especially during the squats, he just heightened it for me. But like then I brought it to him,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I brought it to him, we kind of like took off from there. And like I said, I kind of do a lot of his jumps and everything like that. Like me and Jaden will talk about it, but then when I'm sitting there, I can literally see all his tendencies, and it makes it easier for me to judge where we can go next versus him just playing around and just doing whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, and especially when when it gets to a point where I know he's about to fail, or I can catch him way before he get to that point because I already know his tendencies.
Yeah.
So that's kind
Now,
of
Jane, with yourself over the last couple of years, what are some things that you've changed your idea on or have learned more about that you've implemented, not just with your own training, but with everybody you work with?
Yeah, so I remember when I first started coaching. This is like end of 2019. So this is like right when I was at Westside. I remember the people that came to me when I was coaching them, it was very like straight up conjugate. And I just like, all right, this is too much for people to handle, especially people who are like more like novice. I was like, it was so hard for me to gauge progression and track progression for them because I was like, all right, like these guys are new, like they're maxing out on like a 4-pin rack pull. And then like I got them like next week, like pulling off the floor against bands and doing this and that. And it was just a lot. I'm like, there's way more efficient ways for me to make this kid stronger faster. And like, especially get him like progressing linearly quicker. So changing the, kind of like my style, like doing a lot more conjugate stuff to being like more open to other things, like even like really basic people, like, I'll just run basic linear periodization for people who are new.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I'm never really wanting to train for anything, kind of like just general wellness people. But like with these guys and like my athletes who are more advanced, like everything has to be really specific. So I think just my overall like knowledge on different training systems and how to implement them. And then on top of that, being able to understand like, of course, like the blood work side of things for different blood work panels, like making sure everyone's healthy. Everyone has different health conditions. So really understanding that, I think that's the biggest area I've grown in the most, like as a coach, is like just hormone optimization with all kinds of different athletes. Like I deal with a lot of women and understanding them and making sure like they're still getting like their regular menstrual cycles and making sure they're still staying healthy has been something I really have improved on. And that's something like for me, like as a coach, like, yeah, like I want to be like known for, making athletes like accomplish their goal, but I want to make sure like people are healthy and like they're having like longevity in this, like not just in bodybuilding and powerlifting, but like an actual life. So I say that's the biggest area I've improved on, other than just, of course, like understanding like less is more when it comes to like actual training and like hypertrophy. Because I could say like when I first started off, I was a dude who did too much. I would always do more just because I wanted it so badly. And then I understood like, okay, hey, like this is how much volume needs to occur for me to progress. And like this has been like for me now is the lowest amount of volume I've probably ever done in my life. Also the biggest I've been in my life and the strongest I've been in my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, does it correlate? Yeah, but also too, I built myself up to move these like amounts of weights that are going to be more fatiguing versus me squatting, 315. So I've had to make, changes and adaptations to my own training to where I can keep progressing. I can stay healthy. I can, make sure everything is going exactly how I need it to. And then of course just continuing to like to believe in myself and be more confident with like my own calls I make for myself, my own training, because I used to be the guy who'd always overthink my own numbers. I'd be squatting like and still 800 pounds, 3-4 years ago, and would still question some of the things I would do in my own training. But now looking back, it's like, okay, I was wrong here for sure. I could have improved this for sure. But now it's, you know, it's easy to preach to like people what they need to do, but also like you need to be an example of like doing it. So like for me, it's like mobility work, making sure like I'm getting all my meals and just like checking all the boxes every day, you know. And I think that's one thing is, you know, it's easy to say, but like holding yourself accountable is one thing, and continuing to do that, you know, throughout a daily basis.
Were there any topics you guys wanted to talk about I didn't bring up? Squat setup. Well, day in a life. Here we go. This will be a good one, right? Somebody mentions a day in a life, right? So, what's a day in your life? A training day, right?
A training day?
Yeah. So you wake up.
See, I got the luxury now. I actually have a work from home job, so I have it kind of cush. So like I get to stay home and then like kind of be like a housewife. It feels like. Take my son to my mom to watch him while I, you know, do my job and everything, and then still get like everybody ready for dinner and all that. Yeah, but then when it's a big squat night or like a big bench night, we always try to carb up. So I try to make sure that I do eat healthy,
kind of
enough that like,
you eat enough.
Yeah, like I make sure that I consume at least the carbs that we need the day before and the day of if we have a big lift coming up, just because I know how it feels when you're not.
A lot of McDonald's.
It's not McDonald's.
It's so weird.
But no, I think sometimes it does get tough though. Like there's times where you have to make calls where you're like, you know, family matters and things like that can get in like the way of like lifting heavy, or just your mentality when you're in the gym where you got to make calls like, I think we should push it another night. Or there's been nights where like we've gone in and you've done like a 24 and it's like you kind of got to make calls on like, you know, where do you want to go with the lift? Do you want to take tonight off, like, you know, just because we started and we'll wash it and we'll go to another night? Or do you take that chance and, you know, you might get the lift or you might not, and then you're going to beat yourself up when you don't?
So how do you navigate that?
I mean, it's all, for me, it's all about feeling. I can kind of, honestly, with my squat, I can kind of push the limits a little bit more. So as far as my mentality with the squat, I'm gonna do it regardless. Honestly, I mean, my work schedule haven't changed in 9 years. So I've been with the department 9 years, and I've done crazy schedules, and actually came in max squatted after 24 hours. I'll just load up on pre-workout, and I just zone out, take myself to that dark place, and do what I got to do. I mean, because honestly, I don't really get the luxury sometimes to say, hey, I can come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and my days will be all the same. Every week that we train is different days. So it's never like, you know, the same amount of days. Because some days, because of the way my schedule runs, every day it rotates down a day. So if I work the day shift Monday and Tuesday, I work nights Wednesday and Thursday, and we mostly train nights. So it just rotate down, you know, through the months. And then eventually my night works will be on a Monday and a Tuesday, and then I have to come in Wednesday. And then sometimes we'll come in during the day, and it kind of throws things off for us. And then also some nights we scrambling to get spotters and everything else. So now we taking heavy weights with just random people in the gym. And then the only person that's working the mono is him, and he went from the mono and they'll run around to the back and spot me at the same time. And we got two like little kids that's more scared than me squatting the weight. So, you know, so we just adjust. And we just do what we got to do. But my mentality always, every time, at least when I approach the squat, is either I'm going to get pinned by it or I'm going to stand up. And I just go for it every time. And luckily, I haven't had no issues.
Stood up more than you haven't, right?
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. So what's your nomad life look like? A day in a life? 'Cause I'm pretty sure it's the same every day.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. So, for me, I usually try to wake up at a decent time. So for me, that's like 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m. So I'll get up. First thing I do is fasted cardio. So I'll knock that out. And the reason I still make sure I always do that first thing is I feel like I have to do something hard I don't want to do when I wake up. Something that kind of like sucks. So I get up, do cardio first thing in the morning, and it kind of wakes me up too. And then I'm really big on like gut health. So the first thing I'll do when I wake up in the morning is have my digestion shake after I do my cardio. Which I'll take that in the morning, and then after that I'll go ahead and like make sure I'm getting enough water in, which I try to hydrate decently well with water before I do cardio. eat meal 1, and then after meal 1, I'll start going through a lot of check-ins. So I'll have athlete check-ins every single day of the week, every week. Guys who are in prep right now for shows, so like when I give them refeeds or high days, like they're checking in like 3-4 times a week sometimes, because they're sending me before and after pictures. So I'm always just making sure like I'm super like responsive and on top of that. So I'll usually do deep work for the first 3 hours of the day. After the first 3 hours is done, it's usually like 3 p.m. Or so before I get around the time when I go to train or get ready to train. Then either, of course, I'll come out here in the evenings or I'll go to like a local bodybuilding gym sometimes, just depending on what I'm doing. And then like throughout that time frame, I'm just making sure I'm getting meals in. But one thing I did that really has worked well for me, because I just work from home and coach and have a social media marketing agency, is I'll get up and I'll go to like coffee shops around like downtown Columbus, just because I live in the city, and I'll just work from there. And that's just been good for my mental health, because I was sitting in my apartment just working nonstop. And I'm someone who always feels like I never do enough. So I always just want to be like the best at anything I do. So I would just work like crazy and be trapped inside all day and then go to the gym and come home. I'm like, this is like not healthy at all. I don't really have a life. So I started getting up and just going walking and making sure I get all my steps in, because I track my steps in off season and in prep outside of my cardio. So making sure I'm hitting my step count, of course, in a train. Then usually when I come home in the evening or at night, like I still make sure I get my like last 2 meals in, so meal 5 and 6. And then any other work I got to do, I knock it out. And that's pretty much it. Like that's the consistency on a daily basis. And then if I travel for like some event, or if I'm traveling somewhere for coaching, I just adapt as needed, move check-ins around for athletes if I have to, do programming ahead of time, just stuff like that. So, it's nice. I enjoy it. And, I love coaching just the same, if not more than competing. So, yeah.
Any final thoughts from you?
The only thing I was going to say is like, what is nice is that you are so responsive that like, well, like one of the times at my squat, we were trying to like fix a technique issue on my wrap squat day. And then the following week was going to be SSB. So we're like, hey, why don't we just switch it to just a straight bar? We'll still do the same movement, but can we do it on straight bar just so I can really like hammer down on the technique issues? And he's like, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. But we were able to actually communicate. It's not like some coaches I know where it's like you respond, you're never going to hear back from them, or they give you the program, that's it.
But
yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I'd probably just go back to just like the time he blew his quads out, and then he actually came to me towards the Arnold's. That's when I knew, like, one, I had so much respect for the man, because he rolled up in the wheelchair and he stand up and he wrapped my knees, and I was like, yeah, this is the type of person that I need, especially in powerlifting, and no matter what, he's going to show up. And I've been carrying that mentality the whole time, and especially with him, and I travel for him, and I would travel for him if he actually needed me to, because at the end of the day, it take a special type of person to do something like that. So I got a lot of respect for him in general, and I always say thank you to him, because I don't know where I'd be right now. So it did a lot. So, and I appreciate you for having us here.
Thank
too.
you. Jaden, you have any final thoughts?
No, that's pretty much it. Like I definitely appreciate, being on here. It was nice, have both my guys here today, talking about their meet prep and everything. I'm super pumped for both of them. This is for sure going to be their best meet to date. Being there and having N'dear break the all-time world record would be cool. He's hitting numbers at a weight I couldn't even do myself. So, being able to be a good athlete's one thing, but like taking someone like above and past like what you've done is like another. So getting to be a part of that and like help out with that and see that is like a cool feeling. So I'm excited for that. And then of course, excited for Josh. He won the amateur day last year, N'dear did. So hopefully Josh wins it this year. So I'll be back-to-back years. Both my lifters won.
Yeah, there's your pressure, man.
Yeah.
I had to lose a lot of weight.
You got 3 weeks, man.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank you guys for coming out, and we're done.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You don't want to leave people stranded. If we're going to do this, because somebody's going to have to always be there. One of us would have to always be there, because it was a different.
At the time, all of us started training pretty much together.
You were one of the first, just to start training some of the lifts somewhere else. And your deadlift, went like 100 pounds.
For me.